Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. Today, Sam, we're breaking down the AFC and NFC South, wrapping up our 2026 NFL season previews. It's all brought to you by FanDuel, and it's coming at you from the Mike Vrabel is part of the Bill Belichick coaching tree studio.
That's right.
We've been going at it every day this week.
Busy week.
Just burst of previews. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, went through all the other divisions. Be sure to check that out if you have not yet. Today is the South. Final 8 teams. You ready to go?
Yeah.
Let's do it. There's been some injuries.
I was going to say, it's a good thing we waited because half the players who we're going to be talking about are hurt now.
Yeah. I don't know who's going down for the Panthers today, but hopefully they'll start getting healthier. It's been a rough start to camp.
Yeah.
We'll talk about them in an hour and a half or 2 hours here.
I hate that element of training. Like, it's the worst thing.
It is.
On the one hand, football's back. It's great. On the other hand, people are now going down with ACLs and stuff immediately. Like,
and then you scramble and saying, who's...
It's always from practice one as well. Like, there's never a year where we just get a day's grace. Everyone just practice and stay healthy. No, it's like the second we get back out there practice one, somebody's going down with an ACL.
Yeah,
it's
we don't want that.
God, that sucks.
Don't need that at all. All right, we're starting in the AFC South with the Houston Texans. Texans have been an Elite 8 team over the last 3 years, Sam. Lost in the divisional round the last 3 years, all 3 years of C.J. Stroud's career. Texans defense last year I thought was outstanding. I've been calling it the best defense since the 2015 Denver Broncos, who won a Super Bowl. We'll talk about that defense. We'll talk about C.J. Stroud and the way the season finished last year. Couple rough games, including the win against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but also the loss to the New England Patriots in the divisional round. We broke down Stroud in detail in our 2023 first-round review a few weeks back, and the contract coming up. But Houston heading into this year, over/under 9.5. What are your thoughts? What are you looking for here?
Yeah, I mean, Stroud is now going to be a fascinating watch because of the way that ended. He's just such a weird quarterback now. I mean, we talked before about Bo Nix being a kind of enigmatic quarterback and difficult to lob neatly into a bucket. Stroud is similar for different reasons. You know, they're not the same profile, but like a similarly complicated quarterback to discuss dating back to his college career where none of it made any sense. Like, generally speaking, struggled under pressure or outside of structure, and then, except when he played the best team in the nation and like an NFL caliber defense in Georgia in the college football playoffs, in the biggest game he played, and was fantastic in those situations. It's like, well, which one of those things matters more? The bigger sample size or the better team on the bigger stage with all the pressure under? And year one in the NFL looked like the one game sample size mattered more than that. But since then, he's gone in the opposite direction, and then the playoffs last year was like a multiple game sample size of the exact opposite thing manifesting. It's like you were awful in that game on the biggest stage under pressure and just made horrific decisions left, right, and center. And for one game, you were bailed out for it. And then the next game, you just repeated the trick. And like, it was utterly horrendous play from him.
And look, I know there's two ways of looking at it. I thought part of what made C.J. Stroud's rookie season in 2023 so impressive is the Texans had the number 2 overall pick, and obviously took him. No one was expecting the Texans to do much.
They were expected to suck, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was like, man, he's doing this, and he's helping Nico Collins turn into a star, and he's got rookie Tank Dell that he's throwing to, and a team that hadn't been good for a few years, all of a sudden they're legit. But it did feel like the offensive line took a step back, certainly in 2024, maybe not even all the way back last year. But high level, when you look at what the Texans have done, what Nick Caserio has done as general manager, DeMeco Ryans as head coach, remember, we were sitting here being like, when's this rebuild going to start? 3, 4, 5 years ago. When's it going to start? When's it going to start? Now we're looking at the Texans in the last 2 draft cycles saying, man, if we were suiting up in April, this is one of the best teams in the NFL. They go into the draft with few needs. So I think the pieces around C.J. Stroud on both sides of the ball are really strong. We'll talk about this offensive line. It's strong, but it's questionable all at the same time. But I think Houston goes into the season much like last year. I was very high on them going into the season last year. They started slow. I almost jumped off the bandwagon halfway through, but then they finished strong.
I think you did for like a week.
I may have for a week, but I said, no. Go back to my priors.
Right.
But I do think Houston's got one of the strongest top-to-bottom rosters in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like you said, the offensive line is still a question mark, and that's a pretty big question mark as a unit to have, as an issue. But outside of that, I mean, the defense obviously is pretty fantastic based off last year and what they've done in the offseason. The offense, it's dependent on some of these young receivers, taking a step forward. We love Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, the Iowa State guys. They were solid year one. If they get better year two, then they're really cooking. If they stay the same, they don't get any better, and that's just who they are. Then maybe it's a little better on paper than it actually ends up being. But you would say, I mean, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They're young players. They should get better year two. If that's the case, Nico Collins, I think, somehow is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. I think that guy belongs in the very top table conversation and doesn't tend to get put there. And the rest of that group is in great shape.
So you've got the playmakers broken down there. I think they could be a good receiving group. Also, Tank Dell is coming back from his injury. I don't know how much you can expect from him coming off of back-to-back years. Yeah. I mean, so he gets hurt toward the end of 2024, horrendous injury. Missed all of last year, and he's coming back. I don't think you're sitting here penciling him in and being like, oh, he's the number 2 or number 3 receiver. But if you can get anything out of Tank Dell, that dude was uncoverable at the beginning of his career.
I mean, I think you kind of have to work on the basis that Tank Dell, for the practical projection of this team, doesn't exist. But if he does come back and offer something, it's awesome. I mean, his knee injury it wasn't just, he got an ACL or he broke a leg. It was a devastating knee injury, the type that tended to be career-ending, back in the day, and could still be career-ending if he doesn't make it all the way back. So the fact that he's cleared, the fact that he's ready to go, the fact that we're going to be seeing him in training camp and preseason, all fantastic news. Now let's see, because this is a guy whose game relied on speed, quickness, explosiveness. Let's see what's remaining of that. Because as you said so astutely, Steve, being cleared is not the same as being 100%.
Being cleared is not the same as 100%.
Let's see how close to 100% he is.
I'm going to keep repeating that all of training camp. Doesn't mean this guy's fully back to everything that he was before.
But obviously, it goes without saying, we both really would hope that happens. Love to see that guy make it back after that injury.
Tank was one of our favorite players coming out in the 2023 draft, and he looked great for a year and a half. And honestly, a lot of C.J. Stroud's dip in production certainly coincided with Tank's injury.
Yeah.
The other addition, before we talk about the O-line and the bodies that they've added there, David Montgomery, they traded for him at running back. That helps Woody Marks, last year rookie, who did a nice job filling in when he needed to be the bell cow for a little bit, but I think they want him and Woody Marks in more of a pass-catching role, and David Montgomery allows the Texans to have that early down back, keep them on schedule. I think the last time I felt pretty good about the Texans offense is when Joe Mixon was out there running, right? And I felt good about them. I still thought, hey, the pass game's a little underwhelming. It was year 2 for Stroud, but Mixon was having those games where he's running the ball 25 times, 28 times, and I really think David Montgomery gives them, as I always say on offense, you want ways to win. You need, there needs to be, if the game calls for a 25 carry game, you need to have a guy to be able to do that, and I think Montgomery allows them to be, better in the red zone, but also just keep the offense on schedule.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good addition for them. I like that combination of David Montgomery and Woody Marks in the backfield. I think is a really good one.
Now, O-line wise, here's what they've done this offseason. We've got year 2 of Arante Ursary, who stepped in at left tackle as a second-round rookie last year. Beyond that, we're looking at, if we were ranking their offensive line, how have I positioned this all offseason? I think if you ranked their starting 5, you're probably not ranking them on paper among the league's best or even in the top half of the league. But if you're ranking their top 8, you might say, hey, this is one of the deeper offensive lines. There's a lot of potential there. They bring in Braden Smith from the Colts at right tackle. He was injured last year, but he's had a really nice career at right tackle. You have Trent Brown, who could also play right tackle, most likely being a backup. This is what I'm saying. The depth is pretty good. Yeah. And then they brought in all the guards, right? Ed Ingram, bring back Ed Ingram, bring in Wyatt Teller. You've got Jake Andrews, Jarrett Patterson, Evan Brown. I mean, Blake Fisher as a swing tackle. I think they're 8 or 9 deep on the offensive line, but I still don't know if you have a starting 5 where you're like, man, I feel great about them, but they're throwing a lot at it, and I think it can be improved, especially if Braden Smith gets back to what he was previously.
The Texans might have the smallest gap in the NFL between their first and second string offensive lines.
Yeah, there it is.
When we hit preseason, it's such a fascinating dynamic now in this world of sort of offensive line shortage in the NFL. When you hit preseason, the starters go out there and then they play whatever they're going to play, and then they get pulled and the backups come in. And a lot of times in preseason games in the NFL, the moment the second string offensive line comes into the game is now worthless. They can't hold up to any meaningful degree, even against second string defensive lines, even against second string pass rushes, because there's such a gap between starting caliber and not starting caliber in the NFL that the second you put in the backup offensive line, the game is a waste of time for everybody out there, which means you don't get the meaningful reps from quarterbacks. Like second string quarterback is too busy running for his life rather than trying to operate the offense. Running backs can't work. Whole thing's a waste of everybody's time. I don't know that you'll see a drop-off with the Texans. They can just swap the second-string offensive line in. It's the same as the first string. So that's part of it. And then the other thing that's curious about the way they've built this offensive line is they kind of brought in – they were a bit like the Browns where you could say, they could use upgrading all of the spots, 4 of the 5 spots. They kind of need the entire offensive line. And they threw a lot at it. They threw a lot of bodies at it. But they seem to have sort of assembled a whole bunch of players at the same position, and they're just working on the basis that they can move to a different spot. And maybe they're right. There's less of a difference between left guard and right guard than there is left tackle and right tackle. It's still a thing. And the Texans just assuming that these guys can move around and they'll find the 5 is, at minimum, a gamble.
I almost forgot to mention Keelan Rutledge, too, the guard/center that they traded up to get in the first round out of Georgia Tech. So if Rutledge ends up being the rookie center or whatever the plan is for him, but yeah, they've thrown a lot at the offensive line last couple of years, but particularly this offseason, the way they got a whole bunch of interior offensive linemen and trying to see what sticks.
It's one of those. There's a good starting 5 in there somewhere. I just don't know that they're going to land on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm going to bank on that. I think it'll be better. I think it'll be better than it was the last couple of years, especially if Rutledge hits the ground running as a rookie. So offensively, I think they've got the pieces. A big part of it hinges on Jaden Higgins. I think even more than Knoll on the outside or more than Tank Dell. If they can get Jaden Higgins going on the outside, David Montgomery running the ball when they need it, I think this offense is improved. Defense, and then look, the Stroud question, we could sit here for an hour talking about Stroud and his career. The point is, and you laid it out somewhat quickly, I went through this with Nate Tice, who's always been a fan of Stroud. Go check out the Nate Tice episode if you want, another 8 to 10 minutes on Stroud. I think he's got all the ability. I think there were points where he would get streaky, slumping a little bit. There was also the point in the midseason last year where Davis Mills came in, and it wasn't like he was better, but there were parts of the offense that looked a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. There were just so many games last year where you're looking at this and it's like, CJ, you just have to get the offense to 17 points, 21 points, and it's over. And it was inconsistent and difficult. And it's more than a one-player game. I know it's a team game, and I know it's more than just him, but he's got to be a little bit more consistent accuracy-wise, throwing the ball down the field. And then in the playoffs, it was decision-making, whether he's under pressure or not. Those turnovers, you can't have that. That was implosion territory for 2 straight games, and he got away with it for one, didn't get away with it for the second one.
And he had one earlier in the season against Seattle as well, where he had implosion world. In fact, he had, according to PFF, the entity formerly known as PFF, have they changed yet? Is it still PFF? Anyway, he had 23.
Half of it has changed.
23 turnover-worthy plays last season. 16 of which came in those 3 games, the Seahawks game and the 2 playoff games. That's insane. 16 turnover-worthy plays in 3 games is an astronomical figure.
So to be fair, right?
And that means only, 7 turnover-worthy plays in whatever that is, 14 games, 17, 18, 19.
And we wouldn't say that he necessarily played well last year, but the turnover thing was not like a season-long problem.
But he must have been one of the most turnover-averse quarterbacks in the NFL for 15 games, and then in a 3-game sample size turned into a turnover howitzer.
So last year, this is the fair version of projecting Stroud for this season. last year at this time, we were harping on the Darnold final 2 games.
Yeah.
And we asked the question, how much do you weigh those 2 games? If, the first 17 games of the season were outstanding.
It's a very similar dynamic.
Or the first 16 games were outstanding. What do you do
Yeah.
with the last 2? Well, Darnold bounces back.
Completely.
And there were points where it was like, oh, it's coming back again. It's coming back. But he got over that hump. I think you've got a similar story here for Stroud. And look, we're coming at it this like, hey, they've got a question to answer about their long-term prospects of him. Do they want him to be the next $50 million quarterback? I think Houston is going to sign him, and I think he's their guy going forward. But, it hasn't been, as I always say, linear growth. That doesn't always happen in the NFL. He's regressed a little bit these last couple of years, and it's a big year for him to bounce back.
But it's also similar to Darnold because of the contract situation, right? Like this time a year ago, it wasn't clear at all that Darnold should be paid monster money. Like, let's say it's a different world because of Darnold's history, but like they were both due a contract effectively, right? Right now, you would say there's no reason right now Darnold shouldn't be getting paid $50 million a year based off how he's played the last few years. Obviously, he's not. They got him to a cheaper deal. But it wasn't immediately clear last year that was true, right? In fact, if anything, it was, again, you had this question of the last 2 games were so concerning. How much money can you give him and feel good about it? And the Vikings obviously drew a line in the sand and decided they already have a quarterback of the future in McCarthy, or what they believed was a quarterback of the future. They're going to take the money they could give to Darnold and invest in the offensive line instead, and that's a better way of progressing. Then Darnold plays for Seattle. And not only does he bounce back from those 2 games, it was literally like those 2 games never happened, right? Like there was no vestiges of it, no lingering hangover effect, no haunting in the back of his head. It's just like those games, I've completely forgotten about them. I've deleted them from the internal system. They never took place. That's the challenge for Stroud. Can he come into next year off the back of 2 games like Darnold, where he just imploded, melted down, was horrific, and was the reason, effectively, that they lost a playoff game? And can he just delete those, purge those from the memory banks, and pick up like a good quarterback again, earn himself a $50 million a year contract? Or do those stick in his head and it's like, he's prone to every now and again, he's just going to melt down in some spectacular fashion. Like that, as much as the most recent thing we saw was Darnold just acting like those games never took place, I don't know if that's normal or if that's likely to happen.
I mean, data guy over here.
I don't know otherwise either.
A sample size of one, the most recent thing that we saw, doesn't mean that's what happens going forward. But
it doesn't mean it either way. Yeah.
Right. There's a similar situation here. Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball because, like I said, they are legit. Last year, I did have them ranked pretty high defensively coming into the year. They've gotten progressively better these last couple of years. They were a good defense in 2024. I thought last year they just took it to a whole new level. Will Anderson, as much as we talk about Myles Garrett, I mean, Will Anderson was right there with him from just a pure down-for-down production standpoint. Him and Donnell Hunter as the 1-2 punch. I mean, there are no real weaknesses. If they stay healthy, they look like they'll be a top 3 defense once again. They're loaded on the defensive line. They're loaded in the secondary with Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter as their 1-2 punch. Jalen Petrie playing that hybrid nickel slot type of position for them, and when they did it last year, we talk about disrespectful runs. Mm-hmm. It was like disrespectful defense. It was just like we're rushing 4. Good luck. Didn't have to get creative, but they were creating havoc in the pass game, made opposing lives for opposing quarterbacks' lives difficult, and then I would say like the only. Like when you're game planning against Houston and you say, okay, how do we attack this defense? We don't want to get to 3rd and long. We're going to have to run the ball. We're going to have to, and they're a little undersized at defensive tackle. Well, then they go draft Caden McDonald out of Ohio State, who loves to just reset the line of scrimmage and be a big-bodied, run-stopping nose tackle. So if that was a question, they attacked that with the draft as well. So I love Houston's defense, the depth that they have, the consistency and continuity, and I think they'll be one of the league's best once again.
Yeah, hard to dislike the defense, top to bottom. It's good at all 3 levels. It should be really good again. The only question is, it's hard to maintain an elite, difference-making, suffocating defense year on year. Harder than the offensive side, right? If you have a good offense, personnel-wise, scheme-wise, is put together, it's reasonably easy to be good, the same level year to year to year. It's much harder to do that on the defensive side of the ball because you're reactive. You're more vulnerable to who you're playing, to opposing offenses just having a good day against you, etc. The perfect throw beats the perfect coverage, all that kind of stuff. So that's the only question really that I have about the defense. It's just, do they get variance go against them next year more than they did this year?
Yeah. There's obviously variance issues that could pop up, but they've added pieces too, man. You got Ed Reed Blankenship back there to go with Kalen Bullock. You have just a good combination of, you can rush with 4. Anderson and Hunter, the best 1-2 punch in the NFL. Sheldon Rankins back. Caden McDonald added. Sneaky good signing, I think it was Logan Hall. They lost Tim Settle, but Logan Hall comes in coming off of his best year. So he's like heading into year 5, was a little underwhelming as a second-round pick for the Bucs, but you tend to peak in years 4, 5, and 6 as a defensive lineman, so you get him as a long hybrid type of player. So they're loaded up front. You got Azeez Al-Shaair at linebacker, who's runs around, makes a ton of plays. He's, I don't want to say the heart of the defense, because you got Will Anderson. You have a lot of hearts of this defense. They're just good, man. Stingley, ball hawk, Kamari Lassiter, awesome. Don't care what his 40 time was. They're legit, man. Think they'll be good again. But to your point, it's tough to be elite year over year at that level. So I think they'll still be really good, but maybe not at the special level that they were for all of last season. So, is this the year for Houston?
Is this the year?
Can they?
If not now, then when?
If not now, when? Can they get over the hump? Divisional round each of the last 3 years. Is it fair to say that the rest of the AFC has? They've taken some hits over the last couple of years, right? It used to be a very clear.
AFC's wide open.
Yeah.
Again.
So it used to be. Well, it's the Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens. And there was a couple-year period. And everybody's trying to knock off the Chiefs.
Right.
All of those teams have taken a bit of a hit these last couple of years. The Patriots have come up, and they make the Super Bowl last year. But is this the time? Like, Texans look as set up as any other year to make the AFC Championship and beyond.
Yeah, I do think that the AFC just, on paper, heading into the year is wide open. You've got the usual contenders of Buffalo, Baltimore should be back. You've got teams like Cincinnati that could bounce back if their defense is improved relative to last year. You've got, obviously, Denver, New England, the teams from the AFC title game last year. Nobody should be writing off Kansas City, even if it seems like it may be a down year for them on paper. But then, none of those teams are so prohibitively scary that anybody like the Chargers, the Texans, the Jags, should be scared of them. So I think half the conference should be looking at this and thinking we can be the team.
Over under 9.5 here for Houston. I'm definitely going over. I'm in on the Texans again this year.
Yeah, I think they can win more games than that. I'm in that world where I think their regular season record will be good, but I don't know that they'll get over that hump in the playoffs.
Man, I might pick them as AFC Championship participants this year. Texans to the Final Four. Forgot about the Bengals. Texans-Bengals, AFC Championship. Maybe my early prediction. We'll see. All right, let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts in the AFC South. We got an interesting offseason here for the Colts. Daniel Jones, they picked him up last year, 1 year, $14 million. Looked great early in the season. One of the best offenses in the NFL. They were setting records early in the year. It tapered off a little bit, then Daniel Jones gets hurt. So Shane Steichen, Daniel Jones combination looked great. He's coming off of injury. We'll see how he's cleared, see how healthy he is at the start of the season.
He's already scrambling.
Chris Ballard, last year of his contract as general manager, and he was very honest in saying, I don't need I'm not getting a contract extension. We need to win. So if we were to characterize the Colts year over year, the word solid, which comes out of my mouth a lot. I use it a lot, but it's like, that's the Colts. Solid. Are they one of the top 10 best rosters? Rarely. Are they one of the bottom 10? Rarely. They're somewhere dead smack in the middle, and I think they're right back there this year. But they were playing really good ball the first half of the season last year.
The Ballard thing was kind of interesting. When he said that, did you interpret that as, obviously that's sort of like, if we don't win, I won't be with the Colts anymore. But was that like, I will happily remove I'm done from the game. I'm just going to walk away. I swung my shot. It wasn't good enough, and I'm out. Or is it just like, if we don't win, I won't get a new gig with the Colts, and I'll have to go somewhere else?
No, I think it was just a realistic, we got to win.
But, it just means he won't get renewed, as opposed to, I'm going to walk away from football. I gave it my all, and it wasn't good enough.
No, I don't think he's predicting his retirement. No. I think he just knows this is.
I'm only
if
asking
they're
that.
another 8-win season or 7-win season, he just knows it's over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only asking that because that there's a guy, Kevin Keegan, an old soccer player who died recently with cancer. He did that with the England job years ago. He was a weird sort of always talked about as this super high integrity guy, and it was a little bit maybe of an idealist, a dreamer, as opposed to practical and just, hey, maybe defend a little bit and win the championship. But he got the England job at one point and upped and quit and basically just said, I gave it everything I had and I wasn't good enough. Like, I came up short and just walked away from the job and was like, nah, I'm out. And it was like, I think he deserves a ton of credit for that. Not enough people do that. Like, it turns out I'm in over my head here and I'm walking away. Yeah, I'm not saying Ballard is, but like if they have another non-elite season and he's just like, you know what, it turns out my level is just solid GM.
I don't think he's doing that. Daniel Jones last year, interesting season for him, right? Because the offense was doing really well. I thought he was running the offense extremely well. Where you always have some confounding variables. This happened with Cam Newton one year, where his first 8 games were like well above his level of play, and then he kind of got banged up and regressed a little bit. And I was trying to unpack, did he regress back to just like, was this going to happen anyway, or was it the injury? So Jones started playing through an injury, and then he was out for the season. But before the end of the year, we started to see, 3 fumble games against Atlanta that they still pulled off in overtime, turnover-worthy plays against Pittsburgh when they go into Pittsburgh, and I think they turned it over 5 or 6 times in that game. So was Daniel Jones ready to regress in the second half of the season anyway, before the injury? Yeah. Or do we just never got to see what the second half would look like? But to take a quick step back, Shane Steichen, overall as head coach with Indianapolis, I think he did a pretty good job with Gardner Minshew a few years back.
Yeah.
He's done a good job with Daniel Jones. Anthony Richardson hasn't worked out when he was out there. I'm always back and forth on Richardson. Like, he's been very inaccurate, but it wasn't like completely incompetent offense. You can make the argument that given the quarterback situation, Shane Steichen has actually done a really good job with what he's been given.
Definitely.
Even if it's not like they're winning 12 or 13 games here.
Yeah, the Daniel Jones thing is fascinating because, remember, this time a year ago, he was like, he bailed from the Vikings, who he'd been on the practice squad with. The Vikings thought they were going to re-sign him once they let Sam Darnold go. And he would have, if they'd done that, he would have, A, had a chance to sort of compete-ish with J.J. McCarthy, and B, would have been the guy they turned to once McCarthy sucked, right? Instead of Carson Wentz, it would have been Daniel Jones. So actually, he would have had a really good shot of starting in Minnesota for the majority of that year as well. He decided he had a better shot of starting in Indianapolis. Hard to argue with that, given he won that job too. Then starts the season on fire. The Colts are like the best team in the NFL for 8 weeks. They've got the number 1 seed in the AFC. Jones is setting like EPA per play records. It's all going crazy. Then it started to decline a little bit. Then he gets the fractured fibula, plays through it. Then he tears his Achilles and he's out for the year, right? And now you're left with this dilemma of, well, what do you do with him based off that? I would say, according to reports, he got the fractured fibula sometime week 11 or 12, right? Now, that would mean he'd played at least a couple of games already not well before that happened, right? So it's not like you can point to he gets hurt here, and from that moment on, everything was bad, right? There was already bad before the fracture came anywhere. And then the other thing is, after the fracture, he had a really good game against Houston. So it's not like, so in 2 different ways, you can't point to the fracture and say it's cause and effect, A to B. As soon as he got hurt, that's when everything fell apart. It's like, A, it was already falling apart before he got hurt. And B, even after that, he played like one of the best defenses in the NFL and played really well. I know he only had 200 yards in that game, but he had a couple of like big drops that would have made those numbers better. He had 7.4 yards per attempt. Like, he was a good game. So it's, as always, it's complicated, right? Like, it's not as simple as he got hurt and the wheels fell off. The wheels were probably already falling off. And at that point, you're saying they paid him. So you're paying a guy who, A, has only really got half a season of high-end play for you, and B, is coming off an Achilles injury, which is the big thing.
But not only coming off an Achilles, if we're going to talk about quarterbacks being injury-prone and we're going to bring it up for Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, you have to bring it up for Daniel Jones. He's started and finished 1 season out of 7 in the NFL. He played all 16 games in 2022 when they went 9-6-1 and went to the playoffs. 6 games in 2023, 10 games in 2024, and then the 13 last year for the Colts. So in addition to, he's coming off a career year, and how real is that? It's not in line with the rest of his baseline. Is he going to stay healthy? Coming off of multiple years of injuries now.
But he also now becomes, maybe the most interesting of these recent Achilles injuries, because unlike Cousins, who was 35, Rodgers, who was 40 or whatever he was, Jones is 29 years old. He's still theoretically in his prime. He's already cleared, as he said, to take all contact. He's scrambling in training camp, which is different to mini camps when he wasn't allowed to do that. Medically, he's good to go. But we're in this world now where the timetable for Achilles injuries has been radically accelerated, but we don't have a good idea yet whether that means you can actually be back 100% year one, or if year one is going to be like it was for Cousins, like it was for Rodgers, like you're playing, but you're not the same guy. Now, was that just because they were old as hell, or was that's part of the Achilles injuries now, right? You can be back on the field pretty quickly, but you're not going to be the same guy for at least a year. Jones is the most interesting test case of that because he's 29. He should still be in his recovery, healing prime. Does it take him a year to get back to where he was? And if it does, by the way, that means this year's not going to be good for the Colts, right? Because he can't, therefore, move around the way he used to and all those kinds of things.
He was opportunistic scrambler last year, a big part of their success. He was throwing the ball well, working within the system extremely well, and then a couple big third down runs and picking up first downs with his legs. Jones has always been solid scrambler, other than the times he trips. The way I would cite their playmakers last year, over and over again, Michael Pittman Jr. as their possession guy. He's out now. Alec Pierce. So this is the other change. Alec Pierce, good for a 50-yarder every week, seemingly, averaging 20 yards per reception. One of the best big play threats in the NFL. They've now paid him $28.5 million. Is he going to be more? Man, I forget the exact stat now. But he was like 90th in the league in receptions and top 25 in yards or whatever it was last year. Is Pierce going to have to do more? Is Josh Downs, who I absolutely love, but is he a slot only? They're talking about moving him into more 2 wide receiver sets. Most of the time I talk about when you add a receiver, it just knocks everybody down the depth chart a little bit. You spread the ball a little bit more. You put more pressure on defense. Well, the Colts are going the other way. You take Michael Pittman Jr. out of it. Now can Alec Pierce be more of a high volume receiver? Can Josh Downs be more of a outside receiver as needed? And then you have Tyler Warren, a tight end, in year 2. So and then Jonathan Taylor in the run game. So I thought last year they had really good depth, the right types of receivers, a deep threat, a possession receiver, a slot receiver, a tight end that you move around and run a tight end screen to once a week that works for 10 yards. But you lost Michael Pittman Jr., so you need someone else to step up, and Ashton Doolin, Nick Westbrook-Akina, Deion Burks, Anthony Gold, like who is the guy that's going to step up and replace a Michael Pittman Jr., who's been one of the better, more dependable possession receivers in the NFL. That's my biggest question for the Colts, right? Jones off the injury, pass game taking a hit from a depth perspective. O-line, pretty good continuity there with everybody coming back. Jalen Travis at right tackle stepped in as a rookie last year, replacing Braden Smith, and held his own. Tanner Bortolini stepped up and become one of the better centers in the NFL this year, or last year. So I think they've got some really good pieces on offense, but I wouldn't say as good as what they had last year when they were one of the best offenses the first 10 to 12 weeks.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that Alec Pierce is dealing with an ankle injury and is going to be a slow roll into the season. Like, in a world where the Colts are trying to figure out how to pick up the slack left by Michael Pittman Jr., like how to rework this offense, where to funnel the sort of the targets, the looks, the guy that you just paid a ton of money to is on the sideline for a minute. So you got to figure out, okay, what does it look like when he's there, and what does it look like for the here and now when we just have to get snaps under our belt? So that's not helping them try and figure out how to rework this whole thing.
So the other big move that happened last year on the defensive side of the ball, it was 2 things happening at once. A vote of confidence in Daniel Jones, in the future of Daniel Jones with the Colts. But also there was talk about Ballard. I started this by saying, solid roster. They make their picks, and they just build this not star-laden roster, but they're just good, solid across the board. And it almost felt like Ballard was nudged by the new ownership group, and go make an aggressive move. Go be bold. And they trade 2 first-round picks for Sauce Gardner at corner. And I think this becomes the biggest wild card for what the Colts can do. Sauce Gardner it was a vote of confidence in Jones because you're saying, hey, we're not going to draft a quarterback over these next couple of years. But you also add Sauce Gardner, who's in the prime of his career, $30 million corner. You pair him with Charvarius Ward, who had some injuries last year and everything. We didn't get to see multiple games of Charvarius Ward and Sauce Gardner, long press man corners who could just be pass game nuisances. I think they've got high-end potential because of what they could do in the pass game. We just didn't get to see it all come together. And as much as I love Sauce Gardner, if you're into cornerback wins, he was like 1-13 last year. If you're into cornerback wins, as soon as he showed up to the Colts, they lost. He lost all those games with the Jets, and they lost a lot of games with the Colts once he showed up as well. But I love Sauce Gardner, and I still think him and Ward can be maybe the best cornerback combination in the NFL, probably right there with Stingley and Lassiter. Am I missing somebody off the top of my head?
Surtain and Moss, who you hate?
I mean, Moss isn't good enough to be in the 1-2 punch category.
No, but
Surtain is.
I mean,
but it's a 1-2 punch. It's not a 1 punch.
I'm not saying the second punch is as strong as the first punch, but it's a punch. You hate Riley Moss. He's one of your guys. There's 5 guys in the NFL that you want to run out of the league, and Riley Moss is one of them. Riley Moss is one of them.
I just want a path for
Maro Ojomo, you hate. You don't think he's got any ability to, pick up the slack on that.
You're joking, right?
There's a whole bunch of guys you
Maro Ojomo,
permanent dislike to.
Model guy, 7th round model guy, come good. He
spent an entire offseason being like, they've got no chance of being as good on the defensive line with Maro Ojomo there.
I sit there talking to NFL GMs, be like, look, I hit on Maro Ojomo. He's one of my success stories. I want to run him out of the league. Carry on.
Yeah, well, look, the Sauce Gardner trade, it's a reminder of where the Colts were at that point. Again, they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. They had Super Bowl aspirations at that stage. They went and swung big on Sauce Gardner because they thought, this is a good team already. Let's really load up and attack this championship. And then everything fell apart basically the moment he arrived. And again, I'm not into cornerback wins. I don't think he was a big part of that. In fact, I actually think when he was on the field, it demonstrated the impact that he has. Like, that defense changed in significant ways when Sauce Gardner was out there. They ran a ton more man coverage. They blitzed a lot more. They were more creative because of what Sauce Gardner allowed them to do. It's just that none of it mattered because your quarterback got hurt multiple times and then left, and the whole offense falls apart. So it's just this fascinating sliding doors moment where at one point in time the Colts thought they were a Super Bowl team. And then almost immediately after that, they were like, "Oh, this we're done." Like, we're not even. They were trying to cling on to make the playoffs, and then, just fell apart.
When I look at the Colts team here, I think Latu had a really nice season last year. Still think there's a little bit more in the tank with him rushing the passer. They bring in Arden Key. You lose a guy like Kwity Paye on the edge. I still would rather see. I always look at Arden Key as an edge 3. So if you have him potentially starting opposite Latu right now or JTT, I would have rather see maybe a better upgrade there. I think DeForest Buckner is an absolute star. I think he's their best player. He's their star. Him and Jonathan Taylor, relative to their position. Buckner finally got injured last year and missed some time, but he's been extremely durable for the majority of his career. And I'm really intrigued by the secondary and even just the back 7. Their first 2 picks being C.J. Allen, the linebacker out of Georgia, and then A.J. Halsey from LSU. I think Halsey brings some attitude and ball hawking skills to the secondary. You add him to Charvarius Ward, Sauce Gardner at corner. Cam Taylor-Britt comes in, reunited with Lou. Mekhi Blackman is there. I think the secondary's fun. Like some of their back 7 additions. Rather see a little bit more depth up front. Again, I'll repeat for the millionth time. When I'm looking at teams, I like to be, are you 6 to 8 deep on the defensive line with, different body types and different styles? I don't know that they have enough up front, but I like what they have in the back 7.
They're like 1 or 2 draft pick hits away from this being a much better unit that you'd feel a lot better about. Like if JTT had sort of hit the ground running as it doesn't even need to be an impact pass rusher, but as a guy that can be a solid, addition with 40 pressures or whatever. If Adebawore, this freakish defensive tackle athlete, had become just a designated pass rusher on the inside and been a significant source of pressure, you'd feel better about it. But so far, neither of those guys have hit. Latu was huge last year. That was a big step forward from him and a huge development for them. If he hadn't done that, they'd be in real trouble. But with Latu and Buckner, two guys that you can feel really good about, and then like somebody else has got to find something.
All right, man. Over-under is just 7.5 here for the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. We sort of saw what happened when Daniel Jones wasn't playing well and or at all last season. I think you probably have to assume that's going to be at this point, what we know what we know of Jones and what we know of Achilles injuries, I think it would be crazy to think he's going to play well this year, to be honest. Like, I think if you're projecting what that's going to look like, you would say it's probably going to be a worse than average version of Daniel Jones, and a worse than average version of Daniel Jones is a pretty bad starting quarterback.
I don't know, man. I mean, they surprised me. I certainly wasn't going into the season being like, oh, of course, this is going to be one of the best offenses the first 8 to 10 weeks. We've all been wrong before, but I'm expecting some, even when he's healthy or out there.
Well, they're a classic. I don't even know what was right about them last year. Like, I thought I actually picked them to be a surprise team, and through 8 weeks, I'm like, see, I was a genius, and then it fell apart. I'm like,
you nailed it.
I don't even get that right.
I'll go under for the Colts. Somebody's got to go under. Can't go over on all 32.
Somebody's got to be under it. It's got to be Daniel Jones.
All right, we're going to the Jacksonville Jaguars now. Jags, speaking of surprise teams, the AFC South defending champion, Jacksonville Jaguars, hosted a playoff game last year, lose to the Bills in the wild card rounds. Their over-unders 8.5 coming into the season. Last year was the first year for James Gladstone as general manager, and then Liam Cohen as head coach. Jags heading into another, I say interesting team about everybody, but their offseason, they didn't make a ton of splash moves, and then they go into the draft and made a splash by drafting, against a lot of the consensus and doing it their way. So it's they're a big storyline this offseason, we'll say, the Jags so far.
A big storyline and a funny team to kind of nail down the vibes, because on the one hand, the vibes are great coming out of last year where they were a surprise team. They were way better than everybody thought they would be. Trevor Lawrence, who looked like the switch finally flipped, and all's good, right? On the other hand, everybody hated their draft, universally decried as awful, and reached at every pick. And generally speaking, people didn't like their offseason. So it's like those two things are now meeting in the middle. You're like, well, where does that leave you going into the season?
Here's the X factor. I thought last year we were sitting here through 5 weeks. What did they start, 4-1 or whatever? They started out hot, and we were like, man, there's two ways of looking at this.
Yeah,
they've started out well, and Trevor Lawrence hasn't played well yet. Right? They've started out with they were averaging over 2.5 turnovers a game. They were opportunistic defensively. It felt like they were doing a pretty good job getting the ball to their playmakers. But Brian Thomas Jr. was underwhelming, and Trevor Lawrence was underwhelming. And it's like, man, if they're winning all these games without their quarterback and probably one of their best players, that bodes well maybe as long as they play better. And then all of a sudden, Trevor Lawrence had a 2022 second half switch flip where he started playing better. And that's going to, like, the overarching biggest question for every team is always going to be the quarterback. But for Jacksonville in particular, is this now the time? Trevor Lawrence legitimately turned the corner and went from, yeah, he's a good NFL quarterback, he's fine, to like, man, dude was making some throws last year and playing with a different level of confidence. That once a week, it was like he was rolling to his left and just zipping one where you're like, man, not too many dudes in the league are doing that. So Lawrence was outstanding in the second half. It also coincided with them trading for Jacoby Myers. All of a sudden, he comes in there, and you're characterizing this offense every week as not, hey, they're doing this despite Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is playing at a whole new level where he's feeding Jacoby Myers. He's feeding Parker Washington, who is awesome. Brian Thomas Jr. is playing better ball, but he's not being forced 15 targets a game. You're getting Brenton Strange involved at tight end. So all of a sudden, it went from they're doing this despite Trevor Lawrence to, okay, he's playing the best football of his career. The defense might not force as many turnovers, but they've been good enough. And then they go and win the division and win some big games down the stretch despite the disappointment in the playoffs. That was like my NFL yearbook recap of the 2025 Jags.
I like it. In the chat, Walt says he's got shoes older than James Gladstone. And for most people, I would say that's just hyperbole, but I believe
legit.
him.
That's true.
I think he probably does. It made me wonder for a brief second, do you own an item of clothing older than James Gladstone? He was born in 1990, so 36 years old. You got to have something.
1990. I'd have to see if I have my 1990, I'd be like right on the cusp. If I could find my 1990 minor league Expos jersey when I played in Little League. Because I have my Giants Little League jersey from like 94.
Right.
But that would be, I think listener Mike, my friend Mike, has a 1988 Red Sox shirt that he handed down to his son. So he does. Mike does. I know that for a fact. He was showing me this summer.
Yeah.
So there we go.
I definitely don't. I think the closest I could get is probably a decade away from that.
Not a hoarder?
No.
You
well, my wife definitely
wardrobe.
isn't a hoarder. My dad, it turns out, is a hell of a hoarder based off moving them house the last week. No, but I just think the problem is I'm not keeping something that's like too small for me. So the oldest item of clothing I own still has to fit, right? So I definitely have, which people have remarked on before, this is the most like 1999 looking item of clothing. It's like, yeah, because it's from 1999. It's like it's a Billabong sweatshirt that I don't think I'm not even sure that brand exists anymore. But anyway, that's probably 99. So that's the closest I can get.
Stay on point, man.
Nah.
Let's
go off the rails. Let's talk about Walt's clothing.
Don't let Walt do this to you. So offensively, here's the other thing. My big question coming into this year. Liam Cohen, it was his first year as head coach. And you remember all the controversy around him leaving the Bucs, and there was a lot of stuff. My question is similar to when, remember Brian Daboll had that really good first year. He has a first year with a Giants team that's not supposed to contend, and they go to the playoffs. You never know when the coach is just going to be good going forward. And I thought Liam Cohen, I've mentioned this a bunch, they had a heartbreaking, awful, disastrous loss to the Texans in midseason last year to Davis Mills. It was like a 21, 24-point comeback in the second half, which could have derailed their season and blown the division, and they came back and didn't lose after that in the regular season. Is that Liam Cohen? Is that first off, he's good X's and O's wise, but was that a great rally the troops moment that they just got back on track? My question is Liam Cohen just going to be, a top 8 to 10 head coach going forward? Because you don't know after just 1 year.
Right.
But what a great start for what he was able to do. Yeah. Again, we've seen it with Daboll before, and he kind of tapered off. You can't just declare it. But if Liam Cohen is a great head coach in perpetuity, that changes the Jags' fortunes, right? They're in the mix in the AFC going forward here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got a pretty good track record and resume at this point between being kind of tutored by the McVay system, the Rams. That's you always want to see that. Doesn't mean you should take everybody out of that system, right? The period of time where it was just like whoever's had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay, maybe that took it too far. But still, it's probably a good place to have a guy, with a period of time on his resume. He also, did the stint of going to Kentucky, getting the best version of Will Levis that we've seen. So I think at this point, he's stacked some pretty good things in his favor. So I think you can probably give him the benefit of the doubt so far of saying, yeah, like he looks like he's going to be a good coach. Plus, everything except Trevor Lawrence got better basically the instant he arrived. And then Lawrence did 8 weeks later, right? Like he eventually followed everything else. So, yeah, I think Cohen is probably a positive difference maker to this team. A big X variable is whether Lawrence's second half of the season was for real or if that's just another false dawn from him and he'll go back to being good but not great. That's a big thing. The receiving core looks very good with this X factor of how much receiver is Travis Hunter actually going to play. But with him there, you've got Brian Thomas Jr., who can then be just more of a vertical route tree type of guy, big play threat. Jacoby Myers, really good, high volume, chain mover possession style. Parker Washington's really good, as you said. And then Travis Hunter, bonus, whatever he wants to bring to the table as well. Plus the tight ends, right? Brenton Strange was already good. Borkircher, who they drafted. At this point now, we have to separate the process and the reach in the draft for the player they got, And a lot of people really like the player, just not where they took him. So
I like the other tight end they took, Tanner Koziel from Houston.
Right, and that's the thing. So we're now at the point where it doesn't matter anymore what they spent to get him. We can lambast the process, but we've already done it, and we can do it later. But for the moment, now all that matters is did they draft good players or not?
What's interesting to me, too, about Liam Cohen, remember, the Rams and McVay used to run 11 personnel more. They would roll 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 back, 1 tight ends. They'd roll out there 89, 90% of the time, all of their snaps. I mean, the Jags might have the best wide receiver depth in the NFL. The way Jacoby Myers played last year, the way Parker Washington played last year, what Brian Thomas Jr. is capable of, and then Travis Hunter. who is going to play more corner this year, but they're still going to sprinkle him in to the offense. So even though they have that incredible depth and different styles at receiver, they're loading up on tight ends. I do think it should give the offense a little bit more flexibility, but I think they should also lean into their receiver depth. The entire offensive line remains intact. So we talk about O-line continuity. They're pretty much back. Cole Van Lanen took over at left tackle. They signed him long-term. They saw something in him. And Gladstone's making some moves that are going to be fascinating to look back on a few years from now. Guys that maybe the rest of the league didn't want, and they're saying, yep, he's our starting left tackle. Borkercher, don't care if everybody else has him in the 5th. We're taking him in the 2nd. Going to be fun to see how it unloads this couple of years. The other thing that they've done, there were rumors before the draft that they were trying to trade up for a running back and everything. So the moves that you actually make aren't always indicative of what your strategy was. I do wonder if they would have tried to trade in the 1st to get a Jadarian Price or whatever. But it looks like they're going super lean in their running back room and going, Chris Rodriguez, Bashal Tutin. They spent a 4 and a 7 draft picks over the last couple of years. LaQuint Allen, the 7, and Bashal Tutin, the 4, and then Chris Rodriguez for $5 million. They're going very cheap, very analytically sound running back room.
The Cowboys did a couple of years ago.
Exactly,
where draft picks and retreads. And bargain basement guys.
And I know from a fantasy perspective, it feels uncomfortable. Who's the bell cow? Who's the guy? But I love Chris Rodriguez, man. That dude breaks tackles. I think he needed more carries in Washington.
Bashal Tutin flashed last year. I don't hate that backfield, even if it's lacking in star power.
So I'm a big fan of this offense overall, especially. If Liam Cohen is a legitimate head coach, I think he's a good offensive coach anyway, right? There were games last year where you're saying scheme play. Like he is scheming it up, stealing a few big plays, plus Lawrence playing well, plus the receiver depth. I have a lot of faith in this offense. Defensively, I think there's more question marks on that side of the ball. They were, as I said earlier, very dependent on turnovers. That's the type of thing that could revert back. Very difficult to maintain year over year. And then you look at, did they make any moves this offseason? Did they do anything to improve? I think defensive tackle is one of the bigger question marks, maybe in the entire NFL. And then some edge rush depth, with Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, who's continued to improve, but do they have enough pass rushers to maintain their level of defense next year?
Yeah, I don't love the personnel on defense top to bottom, really. They've got obviously some good players, but generally, I don't love the group at any level. I think a big thing is now going to be, again, it's the Travis Hunter thing. He's going to be a full-time corner. They need him as a starter now, but you now have this risk of he's now twice as likely to get injured as any random cornerback because he's playing the other side of the ball as well. And if he plays the other side of the ball a lot, well, now he's a lot more likely to be injured. For a guy who was already injured last year, it's just more of a risk, right? And you now need the guy more than you did a year ago, where he was sort of he was lower down the depth chart on both sides of the ball. Now he's the top corner effectively that they have. They can't afford to lose him. So that's a big thing. He's one of the biggest guys this year in terms of he's come back with 20 pounds of muscle, looking jacked, and he's in the best shape of his life, and blah blah blah. The classic storyline every offseason. I mean, he looks in good shape, but does that mean he's any less likely to be injured than he was last year?
I showed you my project I'm working on.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to unveil that by next week.
Is that going to draw any conclusions or just
No, it'll just be fun.
Okay.
It'll just be fun.
Because I am kind of curious if there's any...
in the best. I'll try to draw some conclusions.
Because everybody's in the best shape of their lives.
I don't want to give away my secret, but I am trying to put a site together so that which players are in the best shape of their life.
I am curious... does that mean anything ever? Right? Are there ever is there any signal to this guy was in the best shape of his life and he had a good year?
I'm going to go back. No, I'm going to do that as well. It might not be on the site, but I am going to study that.
The other thing I thought would be
no one steal my idea.
No. The other thing I thought would be funny is there was some I like the opposite idea of that. Instead of being this guy is in the best shape of his life, he's now able to do X, Y, and Z in the weight room, or he's run Travis Hunter ran a new personal best miles per hour time on the tracking machine. He was happy about it. I want to see the opposite now, where old people start reporting the new thing that doesn't work. I woke up today and suddenly the elbow's gone. That's a new one. I can't lift anything above the horizontal on my right side.
Can't walk
this year. So we're going to have to pivot to the left side. We're going to have to compensate. We're going to have to really work on the left-handed stuff because the right hand doesn't work so much anymore.
Your getting old algorithm's going to keep picking up more of these sites for you.
I just want a constant update on old people and how they're. And not only I'm in the worst shape of my life, and it's getting worse.
Here's the one other intriguing thing about the Jags team, because you're talking about the defensive personnel, but here's what's happened the last couple of years. And by the way, this isn't all James Gladstone. You've got Trent Baalke brought a lot of these players in. Antonio Johnson broke out with a really nice year at safety last year. Remember, he was a very productive college player, finally came good last year. Monteric Brown, I think, has been a feisty corner these last couple of years. He's the guy that, likely starting opposite Travis Hunter, Jerry and Jones, and Jordan Lewis, both guys that could play nickel. Foya Oluokun, am I getting that right? Somebody corrected me last year. I want to make sure I had it right. They lose Devin Lloyd at linebacker, but Oluokun's been a good playmaker for them at linebacker. So I think they've got some talent. My biggest question's at defensive tackle. They traded Mason Smith for Ruka Roro, a couple failed former second-round picks. I don't think that's upgrading the defensive tackle room. Eric Armstead's getting a little bit older. They need some. With Vita Vea on the trading block, the Jags would be one of those teams where he would make a ton of sense. And if you dropped him in the middle of this defensive line where Trayvon Walker comes back off injury and, like I said, continuing to progress in his career, Josh Hines-Allen, who's been one of the best pass rushers, I think that helps a ton if you can get a defensive tackle upgrade here.
Yep.
See if they do that by the time this is recorded. So here's the deal. High level, you have a team that wins the division. It was year one of Liam Cohen. I'm always cautious about teams who kind of like break out, have that one big year, and then if you treat the offseason as if, well, we were a 13-win team and we won the division, just we're already really good, we don't have to do much. The offseason feels are that they lost more than they added, right? If they reached in the draft, you lose Devin Lloyd, you still have a defensive tackle question. So from off-season vibes perspective, it's interesting, but you're not looking at the Jags being like, of course they improved, right? James' mentor is Les Snead, where you're like, they were already one of the better teams. They added Trent McDuffie and Myles Garrett. Like, they don't have the big splash moves, and if anything, they've lost some key players off this team, like a Devin Lloyd. Not a ton, but they've lost a little bit. Is that enough to repeat as AFC South champions?
Yeah.
Over-under is 8.5 for the Jags.
And that kind of suggests that the man in Vegas is a little bit lukewarm on what they've done as well, and it's going to suggest some regression.
I'm surprised they're not at the same spot as the Texans. They're not at 9.5.
Right, and I think a lot of it is that this sort of concern that the second half of last season was a little bit of fool's gold, and maybe it's not. I think we've just seen the false dawn from Trevor Lawrence too many times to buy in and be like, nah, he's definitely good now. It's like, is he though? I mean, are we just going to go back to being me again? I'm going to go under.
Wow. I'm going to go over on the Jags. I think I'm going to buy into the Lawrence-Liam combo here. Even though I don't love the roster-building effort this offseason, I don't feel better about the roster necessarily. But they had a lot of breakout type stars, breakout players last year that are on the roster. It's better than it feels. Let's wrap it up with the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South. The Titans drafted Cam Ward, number 1 overall last year, and this year add Carnell Tate as his wide receiver 1. Year 2 of GM Mike Bergonzi, and year 1 for new head coach Robert Saleh. The Titans, they've been devoid of talent these last couple of years. They've been in the middle of a multi-year reset. I think it's moving in the right direction. They were very active in free agency, especially with former Giants. Have they done enough to start to make an impact here in the AFC South?
Yeah.
Over under, by the way, 6.5 here for the Titans.
I do like the offseason the Titans have had largely, though, we criticized quite a lot their approach to free agency of just bringing in players that they'd met before. Don't love that, but do love a lot of the moves they made. Did you see, there was a picture that I saw, somebody posted a picture that I'm like 65% sure was AI, but I'm now like, it's so... The world now is just the Matrix, right? It's impossible to know what's real and what isn't. And there was a picture of Robert Saleh at a press conference looking preposterously jacked, right? It's like, but I've seen pictures, like the golf picture of him, he looked ridiculously jacked as well. So it's like, this looks so like he looks so ridiculously large that it must be AI, but it is Robert Saleh. So maybe, and he's had some
How does
time.
that factor into your projections for this season?
Well, if he spent that much time getting that jacked, how much work could he be doing on the football?
There you go. It's like getting your playbook, man.
Like there's a level. I think you want your head coach in good shape. You don't want him.
He's just getting ready for those training camp fights. Remember, Vrabel was always in there breaking him up,
diving straight in.
Yeah.
Like I think you want your head coach in reasonable shape, right? Some evidence that he's in the weight room, he's spending time in the facility. I think at the point where he becomes like a WWE character, it's like, you must be spending too much time there.
No, I think you embrace that. You embrace that because he's doing it at 5 a.m. He's doing that before the players get in.
Yeah. After he runs the steps of the stadium.
You set the tone. That's probably midday. That's like lunch break.
That feels performative, right? Like if you're, the camera's on you at that point,
Yeah, the J.J. Watt.
I want you doing, I want you doing your work in quiet, private, where nobody sees. If there's video evidence consistently.
You calling him Red Light Robert? Is that what you're saying? That's what they used to say about Kurt Schilling. If the camera was on, Kurt was performing.
If there's visible evidence, like film evidence of your workout regularly, I feel like you're performing more than you're doing.
Stay on track, man. I'm over here we're trying to do in-depth analysis on every team, and you're over there talking about Robert Saleh as a WWE character.
I don't think you're fully embracing all the variables that are important here.
I guess not. If I was to characterize Cam Ward's rookie season, it wasn't great overall, but it was difficult. An unbelievably difficult slate of pass defenses.
Yeah.
I think there were definitely some positives.
Yeah.
There's some similarities to Drake May's rookie season where you're saying, man, the O-line's not good for Drake. Drake's got a bottom 3 O-line, bottom 3 group of pass catchers. The stats aren't actually good, but I'm still somewhat encouraged.
Yeah.
I'm not fully there yet with Cam Ward, but toward the end of the season you could be. And he faced the Texans twice, who I already said are the 2000 Ravens. He faced Seattle, the Super Bowl champs. He faced Denver in his first ever start.
Kansas City.
He faced the Jags twice. He faced Kansas City and Spags. Like, he's faced some really tough defenses. And I think that's going to bode well here for year 2.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great example of how, no matter how good and how many stats are available, you can't just look at the stats and expect them to tell you about a player. Like, his statistical output was not good. I guess the one thing you would look at if you wanted to really construct a case would be the turnover, the touchdown to interception ratio, right? Which we've said repeatedly is not the best way in the world to say anything. But that would be like the one way you would say, look, Cam Ward was good. He threw almost twice or more than twice the number of interceptions, 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That's great. It's Joe Montana, right? Now, every other number sucks, right? But the fact that, A, the situation around him was awful, like everything around him basically was bad, and B, that slate of defenses, as you were talking about, he faced some really, really good defenses. Again, like Drake May, the goal was survival. Like, just get to the end of the year and not develop some really bad habits and go into your shell and start, The thing I always fear is, remember that year Baker Mayfield had in Cleveland where Greg Robinson was his left tackle, and by mid-season, every drop back, he's like looking over his left shoulder and being like, run, right? That's what you don't want to have happen, right? Just get out of the year without having developed that trait, and have that sort of entrenched into your soul, and now you can't play quarterback anymore. And not only did he do that, did he get out of the year without developing these bad habits, but by late in the year, he was having some good games against some of these really good defenses. Like, he was pretty good against Seattle. He was very good against Spags. Like, he had some of his best games in the second half of the year against some good defenses. And in particular, I thought early in the first half of the year, like the kind of big game hunting that we saw all throughout his college tape wasn't really there. Like, he wasn't attacking as much. He wasn't making those big plays. I thought the second half of the season, those came back a lot more, and you saw a lot more aggressiveness and danger to his play, danger from a defensive perspective. The fact that that happened in that environment is a really good sign for Tennessee going forward. And then you start building around him with a Carnell Tate and a Wan'Dale Robinson and and all these additions, and suddenly you feel a lot better about them going into year 2.
Yeah, I think it'll be an improved passing attack for Cam Ward. Brian Daboll, by the way, coming in and calling the plays, and this happens a lot too. Just because a guy was like a fired or failed head coach doesn't mean they're not going to be good in an offensive coordinator role and everything. Daboll's done, I think, pretty well offensively. I like that. I like that combo.
Plus, him and Wandale have been working on a special Wandale route tree for like 3 years now. So
Perfect. It's perfect. The other part too that Cam Ward started to do in the second half last year is run a little bit more. And again, it's like a rookie where the season's not going anywhere. It's like you got to find a balance here. But I think,
and they needed to do that.
yeah, if he leans into his legs, I'm not saying 15 times a game, but pick your spots, scrambling. The way I described Jaden Daniels, right, when there's nothing there, if you could pick up 5 instead of getting sacked, it's a huge win. I think Cam Ward has a chance to use his legs just a bit more this year. But Carnell Tate was the move with pick number 4 overall. There was heavy debate about Arvell Reese or would Jeremiah Love be the guy there. Not a lot of people loved the Carnell Tate move. We both liked it because I think we both had Carnell Tate as wide receiver 1.
Yep.
Love his ability to run the vertical route tree on the outside. I think he's an excellent intermediate threat. I think he's good at everything as a receiver, other than maybe yards after the catch or the short game. But I think he has a chance to make an impact right away.
Definitely. I really like that move because I thought it was the right addition to this team. Maybe not the best player that was available to them, but again, given the development of Cam Ward, like the most important thing for this team is Cam Ward becoming the quarterback that they need him to be, and the thing that helps that the most, in my opinion, was Carnell Tate. So draft that guy, bump everybody down the depth chart 1. You know, Calvin Ridley can be his 2. He's a good 2 still. Let's see if the young guys in DK or Ayamaner can develop. Wandale comes in. Like, suddenly that's a much better group if Calvin Ridley is a true number 1 receiver for this team. Now, there's debate about that. Some people don't like him as a number 1 receiver, and he hasn't had to do it yet because Jeremiah Smith is the second coming of Julio Jones at the college level opposite him. But
did you say Calvin Ridley or Carnell Tate?
Which?
That people don't like Carnell Tate?
There are people who don't like Carnell Tate as a number 1 receiver.
Got it, okay. I thought you were saying Ridley.
No, I said Ridley goes back to being a number 2 receiver.
Oh, right,
but then you've got, assuming Carnell Tate is the number 1, that receiver core looks very good. But there are people that don't think he can do that.
Anytime Ridley has help, it does feel much better. You know, there were times last year, okay, he's the guy and he's got a key drop or whatever it may be. Ridley, you know, if he is the complementary piece to Carnell Tate, whether you call them a 1 or a 2 doesn't matter for me. It's just Ridley needs help and not to be the 15 target guy every single week.
Sure.
Wandale in the slot, Ayamaner, you know, who has some size and verticality to his game. Chimera DK, who has some speed. It's coming together, I think, as a pass catching group. I thought Gunnar Helm did some really good stuff last year as a rookie pass catching tight end. So I think all of that's moving in the right direction. In the run game too, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. So I still believe in Spears being an impact player.
I love Spears.
Yeah. So I think the offense is moving in the right direction. O-line wasn't as bad as it felt last year, right?
The Texans
Cam Ward's
are the
under
team.
some pressure, but it wasn't terrible.
I was on a radio hit yesterday, and they asked me for both conferences. You know, who is the team this year that's going to be what the Jags did last year, like come from nowhere and just be a really good team? I could see the Titans doing that. Like, they've got a long way to go, but I could see the Titans, you know, if Cam Ward just takes a big jump, like doing a little bit like the Patriots last year. You're like, nobody, again, we said they had a really wide range of outcomes, and even then they overachieved it, and obviously they were helped by the schedule thing. But, like, they were not supposed to just come in and win 11 games and be like a dominant team. It would be a stretch, but I could see the Titans really surprising people and being a lot better than people think they would be.
And I think that would be on the offensive side of the ball, where you feel them taking some strides on that side.
Yeah.
Defensively, I still have some questions. They've had one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL the last couple of years. Jeffrey Simmons, though, coming off of a career year, maybe the best defensive tackle in the league. I think we both ranked him as D-tackle 1 this offseason when we did our best players by position episode.
Albeit in a kind of difficult field to pin down.
Yeah, I think there's a few guys at least vying for that, including Leonard Williams, per the NFL personnel. But there are some intriguing players here. They traded Tavondre Sweat for Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson comes in. This is where the reuniting happens. He's back with Robert Saleh. I think he's been okay in and out of the lineup the last couple of years as well, but he's been okay as a pass rusher. They trade back into the first round to get Keldrick Falk. He was one of the more interesting draft prospects as young, not productive pass rusher, excellent run defender with some size and some athleticism off the edge. Is he more of a hybrid, old school 5-tech body? Some questions there, but I think he's an interesting addition there as well. I don't know if they have enough juice rushing the passer, but Simmons is a star, and that does go a long way as far as getting after the quarterback. But it's Saleh's defenses. You have Gus Bradley in there as like defensive coordinator and name too. I think it's more Saleh's defense.
Yeah.
Saleh's defenses, they want to win with the front four. And that's the reason why I think he has this job, is because we talked yesterday about the Niners having no one in their front four last year, but they were still, staying alive defensively last year. I don't think this defense is where it needs to be yet, but they're trying to take some steps, especially if Falk does develop as a pass rusher.
Yeah. No, I really like the Keldrick Falk
John
move.
Franklin Myers, I should mention.
Yeah, where they got him. I think inside they're going to be fine because Jeffrey Simmons is a beast. If he backs up the career year, if he continues being that good, he's been more inconsistent than other top-tier defensive tackles throughout his career, I would say. If he continues that, John Franklin Myers is a really good player. Then you've got Jermaine Johnson and Keldrick Falk feel kind of similar and kind of weak in the same area to me, in that is either one of those guys bringing significant, consistent edge pressure yet. And you would say no on current evidence, albeit Keldrick Falk's 20 years old. He could definitely develop that. But they need somebody to bring that part to the table. Like at the moment, this might be pretty good inside rushing the passer. Nobody really making pressure around the edges, but probably pretty good against the run around the edge. So it's a kind of unusual front four.
I want to see how that all unfolds here. Cedric Gray at linebacker did a really nice job last year. We didn't know who was going to have any kind of impact at linebacker. He stepped up, was one of the better runners.
We were at training camp being like, who are any of these people?
Oh, it was like 7th rounder James Williams. Was up. It was a very no-name linebacker group, but Cedric Gray stepped up. I don't think they knew who was going to really play.
I've rarely encountered...
It was Cody Barton and friends.
Right. I've rarely encountered a linebacker group that was so sort of anonymous in terms of who are these people that are going to have to... Two of these people are going to have to play significant snaps for this defense.
The guy I'm keeping an eye on in the secondary, who I loved coming out, Kevin Winston Jr. Remember, he was injured his final year at Penn State. Slow start last year because of injury. I think he's a tone setter type in the secondary. I think he has a chance to really help this back seven with a full season. Then here are my other question marks with the Titans. Cardell Flott comes in, again, from the Giants. Alontae Taylor comes in. It's like the one guy that they hadn't coached previously, if I remember correctly. Comes in to play nickel from the slot or from the Saints, and he's coming off a career year. The free agency moves, I know it might not be the most attractive destination right now, the way the Titans are from a roster perspective, so maybe you have to overpay a little bit. It did feel like, remember we used to say, here are the things you don't do in free agency. Don't just get players you're familiar with, and don't get players coming off of career years. Career year Wan'Dale Robinson, career year Cardell Flott, career year Alontae Taylor. Those are some of the moves that the Titans made this offseason. I don't know if I have perfect alternatives, but that's the thing to keep an eye on, right? They paid for some players who were coming off of, hey, year 4 breakout, year 5 breakout, whatever it was. Can they keep that going? Because if they can, there's some improvement here. But if Flott regresses a little bit, Taylor's been very hit or miss, right? Like if you're a Saints fan, you probably saw him making a ton of big plays the last 4 years, but there's a lot of times he's out of position or missing tackles or whatever it may be. So I think there's some volatility to some of the free agent moves, particularly in the secondary.
Yeah, I don't hate any of the moves in isolation, but it's like you said, they've just sort of they raise a couple of red flags in terms of process. Like there's a selection of things that are generally not good things to do when it comes to assembling a roster. You mentioned a couple of them. A third one I would throw in there is signing guys that had really good games against you last year. The Eric Walden fallacy. And it's not that I hate any of the individual players that the Titans signed, but it's that they all almost universally neatly fall into multiple of those buckets.
Like all potential regression candidates. Yeah.
And it's like that just feels like a bad process to me. It might work out. Maybe you get lucky and you actually, got good players that you need and they continue that. But it just feels like a bad process when that's happening, and that makes me concerned by it. Like if there's a reason those things are seen as red flags or seen as things you don't do. And if you did that almost universally, whether or not you meant to or not, it just feels like a bad thing.
There's also been, some front office turnover with Bergonzi's in year 2 as general manager. He now has full roster control. He comes from Kansas City and, another year of his fingerprints on this roster. Is it enough for them to get over 6.5 wins this year?
Yes, I think it will be. I think this team will surprise people.
Okay, You almost talked me into it. I'll still lean under here for the Titans. We're the AFC South. We did it.
How hard could it be?
One more division to go. But first, check the mics, brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, do you think you know who's hitting a homer today? Well, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. Joining the action's easy. You just make your free pick on who's hitting a home run in their game, and if you're right, you'll get a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. You got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. And don't forget, you can make a free pick every day during the MLB season. You play a little strategy here. Which teams, who's pitching, the ballpark factors are huge. If you're playing in Colorado, you're playing in this little bandbox over here in Cincinnati. Ball flies out to right center. I think that's why the Reds have so many homers this year. So a little strategy involved in who you're going to pick. It's just another reason why FanDuel is the home for home runs. So you ready to play today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com/33rd. That's FanDuel.com/33rd to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Got to be 21 plus in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. No purchase necessary. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York or call 1-877-770-7867 in Louisiana. All right, man, Division 8 of 8. It's the NFC South, starting with the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of change here in Atlanta. Raheem Morris out, Kevin Stefanski in, Ian Cunningham in as general manager, and Matt Ryan in as the Matt Ryan designated president role of the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan into the Matt Ryan role. So a lot of change in Atlanta. You have Tua Tagovailoa also coming in, double lefties, Tua and Michael Penix Jr., both coming off of injury, banged up here early in camp, but one of those guys will be starting. What are your thoughts on the Falcons? What are we looking at this season? Over under, by the way, 6.5 for the Falcons.
How dare you dismiss current QB1 Jack Strand, undrafted free agent, who's
apologies.
the only man left upright, so he's taking all the snaps right now. They signed Cooper Rush because they don't have a quarterback. Tua is dealing with something. Michael Pittman isn't cleared to play yet, so undrafted rookie Jack Strand is currently the only quarterback available to them to throw passes. And then they signed Cooper Rush to do that until one of their two quarterbacks gets healthy and actually can operate the offense.
Presumably that won't matter start the season, though. So
you would hope, yeah. I mean, things have gone pretty badly wrong if one or other of Jack Strand or Cooper Rush is QB1 come week 1.
If I was to characterize the offseason for Atlanta and Ian Cunningham coming over from the Bears, I would say I think they have had decent talent these last couple of years in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Some offensive personnel, the offensive line mostly intact, added some defensive playmakers last year. It's going to be fascinating looking back at Terry Fontenot's run here in Atlanta where they added the pass rushers, James Pierce and Jalen Walker, and tried to make the move for Michael Penix Jr., and some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. So they had some talent, and sometimes new general managers come in and they're just like, got to win now, let's go. It felt like the offseason was like a sprinkling of third-tier free agents, and they didn't have a ton of draft picks because of the James Pierce move. They didn't have a lot of high picks. So there wasn't a lot of additions this offseason or splashy moves for Atlanta. So they feel worse than they've been these last couple of years. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. They feel in a similar place to the Colts to me, in that they've been sort of solid, but haven't deviated too far from that in either direction. They're fascinating because they've made 2 of the 3 most radical, aggressive personnel moves draft-wise in the last long period of time, right? The Michael Pittman thing, Michael Pittman thing.
Penix.
Sorry, Penix. Yeah. I said Pittman the first time as well, right? Yeah, Michael Penix.
That was amazing, actually.
The Michael Penix move and the James Pierce move, and then the third one would be the Will Anderson Jr. trade that the Texans made. And yet they're still in this situation where we don't know if we have a quarterback yet, and James Pierce Jr. has already gotten himself into significant legal trouble, which he appears to have dodged so far, but that can't make you feel good about the long-term outlook there. So yeah, it's a solid team, I think, top to bottom.
And so I don't mind, coming in and saying, okay, we're not just going to go for it right away. I think quarterback wise, I think it still makes sense for them to figure out what they would have in Michael Penix Jr., even though it wasn't Stefanski's pick, it wasn't Ian Cunningham's pick.
It feels like a bit like the Browns, where it's like, what is the upside of the other guy, right? Like, do you imagine a world where Tua is the long-term starting quarterback here? If you don't, I can't really see one.
But at the same time, I mean, look, it's a wild world here. Tua had a lot of success in Miami.
Sure.
Until the end, he didn't. But even when he was having success, you saw a ceiling, whether it was Tua, whether it was Mike McDaniel, whether it was the style of offense. They hit a ceiling, which was, hey, we're playing the Bills or we're playing the Chiefs, we're playing good teams, and there was a cap.
Well, you saw that, and you have this radical extra step of the concussions for him.
True.
It's not a factor for other quarterbacks. So I don't really see a world where Tua is a viable, legitimate, serious long-term starter for this team. And if that's the case, then there's no real purpose in starting him as opposed to Michael Pittman Jr. God damn it, Michael Penix. Why do I keep saying Michael Pittman?
Why have you done that 3 times now?
I don't know. I don't see a purpose to starting him over Michael Penix Jr.
Nailed it.
So, I mean, I guess, if you want to throw Tua's concussion history out there, you could throw the same thing for Michael Penix in terms of knee injuries at this point. Like, at that stage, they just don't have a quarterback on the team, and it doesn't matter which one of the guys they're rolling with.
So I would say it's a bit of a reset year for them. See what you have in Penix. See if Tua can be the guy going forward. We could be honest about Tua's situation the same way the way I described Kyler Murray. He's one of the best bargains in the NFL at
it's a great addition. Yeah.
I mean, Tua at $1.2 million because Miami's paying for him, that is an absolute steal, right? But it's a transition year to figure out, okay, do we want to buy into Tua? Maybe he's a great fit for Kevin Stefanski. Who knows? But you're taking a step back to kind of like reset here because you have your core piece in Drake London. They've just re-signed Kyle Pitts. You have Bijan Robinson. So you're going to have that nice playmaking nucleus. Mentioned the offensive line. They're going to have 4 starters back out of the 5. And then defensively, they've at least added those couple pass rushers in James Pierce and Jalen Walker the last couple of years. Had a find in Xavier Watts at safety to go with Jesse Bates, A.J. Terrell at corner. So there is some talent. But it feels like everywhere around there, lose Caden Ellis at linebacker. You lost some pieces. You don't know who wide receiver 2 is. Darnell Mooney is out, and even last year, he was banged up. They didn't really have a really good second option, and they just stitched that together this offseason with Jahan Dotson, Olamide Zaccheaus, drafted Zachariah Branch in the 3rd round. So again,
who doesn't feel like that type of player. Like he's not the guy that's going to become wide receiver 2 for this team, you wouldn't have thought.
So what I'm trying to characterize this, if Ian Cunningham came in and said, let's go win the NFC South, they'd probably be a little bit more aggressive at who's the second wide receiver option. We have to get better at defensive tackle and let David Onyemata walk, right? Mm-hmm. They've just taken a hit. They lose a starting linebacker. They've lost more than they've gained this offseason.
Yeah, they have. They're another team, I mean, in this world of all the signings for the season have still not taken place yet, right? And we've talked about Stephon Diggs making a ton of sense for Washington. I mean, Stephon Diggs would be a guy who makes sense for Atlanta if they could make that happen. So maybe wide receiver 2 is not on the roster yet, and they'll find somebody to come in and try and make that happen. But it is a weakness right now on paper heading into the year. I feel okay about the defense, actually, and they maintain the coach, the scheme there. Jeff Ulbrich and the beard.
Beard maintenance is good.
In addition to the beard, I feel good about the scheme generally. It's very contingent on young players. I mean, you got the duo that we talked about up front with Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr., assuming James Pierce Jr. can keep himself in the building. Brandon Dorlus, I thought, took a step forward last year, and they're going to rely on him more this year. Avion Terrell has come in to join his brother A.J. Terrell. He was a prospect a lot of people liked. Divine Diablo was a real find for them at linebacker, having been a safety beforehand, kind of like a Zach Bond type of deal.
He was awesome last year. I thought him and Caden Ellis as a 1-2 punch at linebacker were awesome. Last year.
I mean, Diablo feels like a legitimate Zach Bond thing where you just found a really high level linebacker who'd been miscast or not in the right thing before. Xavier Watts, you already mentioned. Jesse Bates is still a solid player. Like this defense could be very good.
The question in the chat about James Pierce Jr., I don't believe he's expected to miss any time.
No, I think they already plea bargained it or whatever. I think he's fine. Now, I guess the NFL could come down and suspend him, but I don't think that's supposed to happen because he effectively got away with it.
But Pierce and Jalen Walker as the 1-2 punch rushing the passer. I've got more questions about defensive tackle. I mentioned the Jags traded Mason Smith to the Falcons for Ruka Rororo. Again, former failed second rounders. I think defensive tackle, one of the weaknesses on this team. But I like the two edge rushers. I like Diablo, as you mentioned. They got some ball hawks in the secondary. So including Billy Bowman, who was a little up and down last year, but you saw some of his ball skills as a rookie. Let's just go back to, well, what are we expecting here for Atlanta? Because I think, like I said, both sides of the ball feel a little bit worse. But you're in the NFC South where if Tua gets the start and he's in a dome for more than half his games, right? That's a huge factor, right? I mean, he can throw with anticipation and throw it open, get the ball to Drake London, get the ball to Kyle Pitts. I still think Penix is a better fit for guys like London because he's more willing to zip it outside the numbers and you just have more of the field to attack. But
London's at his best working over the middle on in-breaking stuff anyway. Like that part actually syncs up well with Tua.
I'm trying to be careful because we get into this world where if the quarterback's 12th or worst in the NFL, sometimes teams move on from them and it's a failed experiment. Just because the Cardinals moved on from Kyler and the Dolphins moved on from Tua doesn't mean that they're cooked and they're never going to be good ever again. There's a chance that Tua goes out there and puts up good numbers and feeds London and Pitts, and this is a pretty good offense, especially with Bijan. This is a pretty good offense.
Yeah. The other huge variable is Stefanski coming in to be the head coach, but also presumably to run the offense as well. And now you've got, Stefanski is a 2-time Coach of the Year winner, a guy whose offense in multiple different spots had been really high level. And then in the last couple of years, like the wheels fell off. He got lost in the tall grass. And I think a big question is how much of that was just trying to find some way of making the Deshaun Watson thing work, right? Like how much of his offense got bastardized beyond all recognition because they were just trying to find something that made this guy Watson functional again, who, had previously been a really high-level quarterback. So logically, like if you're the coach, like, okay, clearly it's a terrible fit, my system for his skill set. We didn't expect that. But I know he's good. Like, I've seen it. Therefore, I'm the problem, right? So he's constantly, like, changing his own offense, trying to warp it to something that will make it work for Deshaun Watson. And then I just don't know that he could ever find his way back to the path, right? So now he's had a whole offseason, reset. You got a new guy. One of these guys should theoretically be a viable NFL quarterback. Can he reset his offense? Like, can he get it back to being a decent NFL offense again? Or did in addition to screwing the Browns for years, has Deshaun Watson also broken a 2-time Coach of the Year who just doesn't know how to fix an offense anymore?
Blame Watson for everything.
Because, the game has changed as well, in addition to Stefanski trying to warp a system to fit a quarterback that wasn't going to make it work. During the time that's been happening, like the league has been evolving, defenses have been changing. Like it's not a case of just delete the last 3 years of game plans and go back to the system that was working before, because it probably isn't going to work the same way anymore.
I'll say this about if Tua is the quarterback for Stefanski as well, is this the best offensive line Tua has played behind? Because it was never a good offensive line in Miami, and then you're like, well, Tua is a big part of protecting them with the quick release and everything. They've got the 4 starters back, as I mentioned.
I didn't realize they'd reunited both Juwan Taylor and Wanya Mars.
They're doubling up on Chiefs tackles in Wanya and Juwan. But that'd be like the one weakness is right tackle potentially on this group. So it could be the best offensive line he's had. And then you have double B Robinsons, Robs in the backfield, Bijan and Brian Robinson as the 1-2 punch. I do wonder though listen, Tua put up really good numbers with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. This is a completely different style of pass catchers, but London, Pitts, Bijan out of the backfield, I think they could put up some numbers. I'm almost talking myself back into maybe the Falcons are going to be sneaky good, right? I'm trying to be careful with if you come into the offseason, did the team improve or not improve? You can almost talk yourself into most teams showing potential improvement, right? Like you can at least see the path. With Atlanta, it just felt like way more going out the door than coming in part because they're resetting from a financial perspective, and then they didn't have as much draft capital. But the nucleus and foundation is still pretty strong. So 6.5, is that too low for Atlanta? I'm talking myself into going over here, I think.
Yeah, they do feel like a better team than that, but I can definitely see a way this goes badly. Like, you can imagine a world where Stefanski's broken, his system's not working. Even if Tommy Rees is calling plays, it's presumably still Stefanski's offense. And then they don't have a quarterback. Kyle Pitts doesn't back up the career year that got him paid, and the whole thing it's basically Bijan Robinson trying to make it work behind a good offensive line, and that's not enough. So, yeah, I think I'm probably leaning under.
All right, I'm going to go over for the Falcons. Over the 6.5. Talked myself back into it. Hey, Paul Skeen's coming to town. They moved him. They moved him from tonight to tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I was over here.
Because God knows.
I had an in to get in tomorrow night, or tonight to the game, but now that Skeens has moved to Friday, I don't have the same ability to get to the Friday game. So I got to go to SeatGeek.
I was going to say, you mean beyond buying tickets?
I mean, yeah, like I could go to like a free midweek game. So if he was pitching tonight, it'd be free. But now I got to get tickets.
I got to pay.
I got to actually pay. So I'm going to SeatGeek. So got to give a shout out to SeatGeek, who's getting me to the game tomorrow night, Pirates and Reds, to see Paul Skeens. With over 35 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There's more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. MLB is in full swing. That's why I'm going to see Skeens versus Hunter Green, by the way. It should be a great matchup. College football starting back up. I always like to check out the places in the area: Ohio State, Notre Dame, University of Tennessee. Get all the best college football games available, and of course the NFL and NBA. Love using SeatGeek. It's so easy to use. They're back with their ticket scale, which is very familiar to us, Sam. You know you're getting a good deal if you find the green dots. So green means good, red means bad. And so go find those green dots, man. Go find those greens on SeatGeek. Every ticket's backed by their buyer guarantee. And of course, we have a promo code for you guys. You can use code Mike10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code Mike10, MIC10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thank you, SeatGeek. Carolina Panthers are up next. A very positive offseason for the Panthers.
In 48 hours of training camp practices.
Even before training camp, Tyler Moton coming up with was it blood clot?
Taylor, right?
What did I say?
Taylor.
Look, it's harder to say names properly, I guess, as you're 44. That's what's happened.
Yeah.
3 Michael Pittmans. We need a mistake name counter or something going here. Taylor Moton. A lot of injuries here so far for the Panthers. I don't want to hop on that too much because I would say the couple of years of Dan Morgan as general manager, this has gone from one of the worst rosters to it's creeping back toward average plus, right? Like defensive line looks much better. Receiving group looks much better. It's moving in the right direction in Carolina. A lot's going to obviously hinge on Bryce Young and his pivotal year and trying to figure out if he's the guy going forward. And he's got to find some semblance of consistency because it's either half-season stretches where it's bad and then another half-season where it's good, or last week it was game to game and week to week. Got to find some semblance of consistency from Bryce Young this year for the Panthers to truly compete in the South. And I know they won the division last year with 8 wins.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, we have to talk about the injuries a bit because they're losing major players.
We will. I mean, I'm just saying I don't want to – it's not the only story, but like
no. And some of them,
we go through the positions.
Some of them long-term, right? Nick Scorton, who was going to be a big part of that defensive line, is done for the year with a knee injury. The Taylor Moton thing is changing their plan up front. I mean, to be fair, that's one where they have the contingency for it. We kind of praised them in the offseason that the way they handle that offensive tackle thing. You've got Ike Ekwonu coming back from injury. That's going to take some time. So they signed Rasheed Walker from Green Bay for like $4 million, like an absolute steal. And then you draft Monroe Freeling in the first round, and now you can slow play Freeling or put him into the starting lineup week 1, depending on when he's ready, right? You don't need to start him week 1 if he isn't. Well, now you might need to start in week 1 because Taylor Moton is dealing with these blood clots, and suddenly Freeling's got to go to the right side. Rasheed Walker's got to start at the left side, and now you've just lost the flexibility, right? Now those are the guys that have to start because they're the guys that are healthy. Scorton going down really deals a blow to what that defensive line, the pressure is going to be. He may have been there, Jalen Phillips, they paid big money to, but they would have been expecting a big step forward development, growth from Nick Scorton. And we're not going to see that again. Chris Brazel's gone down with an injury that might keep him out a bunch of weeks. So they have this theory. There was this conversation about Teterow McMillan playing much more in the slot in year 2, moving him around. And that requires the Matt Harmon trademarked sacrificial X that Chris Brazel was going to be, right? It doesn't matter if he's productive doing it. The point is he can play those snaps. Without him, McMillan probably has to stay outside playing X and doesn't get the benefit of moving around the way they would have wanted to do. So, it's very early in the process, and the Panthers have been unfairly dealt a real blow in terms of injuries relative to most teams so far.
I think the Nick Scorton one's a really big one. Let's start on defense, because it was Derek Brown and friends a couple years ago. They tried to bring in Tershawn Wharton last year, and remember they were in on Milton Williams, and that was going to be the big move, and then instead went with 3 players instead of Milton Williams, Pat Jones, Turk Wharton, and Bobby Brown III. And, so they tried to replace Milton Williams, or the perceived or theoretical Milton Williams in the aggregate. But then they get Jalen Phillips, as you mentioned, this offseason, drafted Nick Scorton last year in the 2nd round. You had Lee Hunter at defensive tackle. They've added a lot of talent on the defensive line.
Yeah.
But losing Scorton makes fellow 2025 rookie Princely Lumen-Mielen, who's more of a designated pass rush type, a lot more pressure on him to get after the quarterback. I thought they were going to be in pretty good shape with the ability to maybe create pressure with their front 4 this year, but that takes a hit. And then the Brazel thing, it's an interesting one because McMillan was the clear go-to guy. Jalen Coker did a lot of nice stuff as well. But when Brazel's out there with his size and speed, puts a little bit less pressure on Xavier Legette, former first-rounder who's been very inconsistent out there. And you just try to let Legette be the, after the catch, or, maybe catch a couple down the field here and there. But you can't rely on him down to down. So I think more pressure on Teterow and McMillan to just be targeted even more and to be the go-to guy. He was fantastic last year, but obviously you want to have more depth from a receiver's perspective. So, it's a tough early camp so far for the Panthers. The one positive, though, is Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah.
At running back. All of the positive is Jonathan Brooks making plays. Former 2nd-round pick in 2024, missed most of all of 24, and then injured. Remind me of the timeline here. Injured at the end of 23, played a little bit in 24, missed all of last season. Did you get that right? But he's barely played.
Basically back-to-back ACL injuries.
Yes, barely played over the last 3 years. But I think we both had him as the top running back coming out of that draft, despite the injury. I think he's so good running the ball. You add him to Chuba Hubbard, and they've got a chance to have a really nice 1-2 punch at running back there. But Brooks is making a ton of plays in camp right now.
Right. I mean, we're a couple of days in a training camp, so it's A, a really small sample size, and B, running backs tend to look good in early training camp.
I just want to know that he's healthy.
Right. When the pads aren't on and you don't have to do a lot of the things you actually need to do in a football game to look good. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But the big thing is he's out there actually playing, right? He's out there actually doing stuff. He looks like he's going to be a factor. And that would be great. I mean, a guy back-to-back ACL injuries for a running back is a really, really bad thing, right? You're incredibly concerned about that guy going forward. For him to make it back and be the player that they thought he was going to be when they drafted him would be huge. And they kind of need him now. Like, they would really like Jonathan Brooks to be a significant factor in this offense. It's just unfortunate that it seems to be coming and coinciding with all these other guys getting hurt. It's like we'll give you Jonathan Brooks healthy, but we're going to, the price for that is going to be 5 other starters going down. Unlucky.
Man, I love Brooks. I think he's got a chance to make an impact there. So, look, offensively, Teterow and McMillan, the 1-2 punch at running back, hopefully see what happens with Brazel coming back. But, McMillan and Coker are a good starting group. I do have the concerns on the offensive line, though, because I liked Monroe Freeling as a developmental tackle. I just don't know if I don't know if he's ready yet. The guy that came to mind where that was said, similar size and athleticism, was Nate Solder coming back. Remember I mentioned him during the draft process?
Yeah.
He was seen as a guy coming out of Colorado who's a bit of a project, and he had Dante Scarnecchia to work with, and he kind of hit the ground running. He didn't have to start right away, though. He was eased into the lineup, and then by year 2, he was pretty good. I mean, it just feels like Freeling's just going to have to speed up his development. But they did future-proof it well with the 1 year of Rasheed Walker and bringing Freeling in. So I think they built the depth properly, and they at least have the right people in place to fix it. But it comes down to Bryce, man, with this offense. I thought, just to go through his career very quickly, completely overwhelmed when he entered the league. Looked small, played small, arm looked small, didn't have the natural playmaking ability that I think he showed at Bama. Year 2, you kind of hoped, would it improve? The first 2 games looked just as bad, if not worse. He gets benched, but then he came back and played much better. And it rarely showed up in the stat sheet, but he would make big-time throws. He'd scramble around and make plays, looked more comfortable, more confident, thought he might carry the momentum into year 3, and it just wasn't there. It wasn't anything like the first year, but it was week to week, right? Some weeks were good, some weeks were terrible.
Which was true for the entire team as well.
And that's how the team played. There was a lack of consistency. I think they did a really good job in underdog situations, right? They upset the Packers, they upset the Rams. They did a good job at underdog situations, shortening games and increasing volatility and playing the underdog role. But the week to week consistency just wasn't there. And I think you're going to need that from the quarterback if you're going to make some kind of run in the playoffs this year.
He feels like, he's almost settling into a Baker Mayfield style of career trajectory so far, where it's been all over the map.
Like, good luck predicting what's coming next.
Well, it's been everywhere, but it's kind of evening out to okay.
Yeah.
Like, you've been wildly good, wildly bad, and somehow this is like leveling off as just okay and solid and viable, but nothing spectacular. It's a big year for him because I think it's make or break in terms of a starting gig going forward for him. I'm still not ready to write him off as he could be the guy going forward, but he does need to step it up from last year for that to be the case. The other interesting thing, I think, that we haven't asked the doctor about this, but in this offseason where the most valuable thing in the entire world was tight ends, everyone's chasing tight ends, 2, 3 of them, doesn't matter. Give me all the tight ends. I'll buy the whole bag off you, right? Give me all the tight ends. I'll take a 6-pack of them. The Titans or the Panthers might not have a viable tight end at all, let alone 3 deep. Like, the Rams have 5 of them. Panthers might not have a single tight end that deserves to be on the field.
It is interesting that they've gone that route. Tommy Tremble, I've always loved him. Finally came good as a run blocker last year for the Panthers. But, as far as like pass catching threats, I thought Jatavian Sanders might have some ability a couple years ago. That's never really come to fruition.
Yet. Maybe,
Tremble's a good run blocker, but you don't have that pass-catching tight end, which would be a nice compliment to McMillan, Coker, and Razzle when he's out there, especially all that size that they have. Potentially, if you had another good pass-catching tight end in there, that would be
and also just
one of the weaker tight end rooms in the league.
Again, like everyone's trying to get the ability to run 13 personnel because the Rams did it and it worked, so therefore that's what we should do. Meanwhile, like the Panthers, they
12 is a stretch.
Right, 12 would be a problem. 13 is a pipe dream.
Yeah, I do wonder how much of that is, whether the opportunity existed or not, or you just have to get other places where you want to invest.
It's because when we got to this may be harsh, but we got to the draft. The Jags are out here overdrafting guys by like 5 rounds to get their guy. Could you imagine Eric sitting in the war room being like, do not, whatever about taking a guy in the first round, we are not overdrafting a tight end by 3 rounds.
Guys, there's a tight end run.
Right.
Don't care.
Dan's talking about making the move in front of him. Eric's about to jump over a table and tackle him to the ground rather than let him draft the tight end, overdraft him by 3 rounds.
Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Mentioned, a couple of years ago, the defensive line was pretty weak. Derek Brown was the one guy that you would trust, and even he missed most of the season a couple of years ago. But it's so much better on paper, and it's really unfortunate with the Scorton injury, but it's still a better group. And has, like, if Tershawn Wharton got hurt early last year, he was that guy that was like a really good, say, second, third defensive tackle for the Chiefs, could rush the passer a little bit. But I liked the 2 offseason moves. We've mentioned Jalen Phillips a couple times here, but also Devin Lloyd at linebacker. I think they got good prices on both players as well. Lloyd's been I think a really good playmaker at linebacker. It feels like the NFL's a little bit lower on him. Jags let him walk. Wasn't a huge market for him. They got him for $15 million, but a lot of the season last year, the middle of Carolina's defense was very weak pass game wise, and I think Lloyd adds some range and coverage ability at linebacker for them.
Agreed.
Like that addition.
Was it? I forget which one. Was it Robert Mays? Or either Robert Mays or Greg Rosenthal? I forget which one said this, but he was like, Jalen Phillips, I think, got the biggest money, the biggest payday from their free agent spending spree, but actually Devin Lloyd is the guy that he expects to make, the biggest impact on that defense.
And a big part of that's where the linebacking group was.
Yeah,
like they needed somebody, and I think that's a nice addition. Then you look like J.C. Horn at corner. They locked him up a couple years ago. He made a bunch of big plays for them last year, and then they got Mike Jackson. Was it like a end of training camp trade or waivers or whatever it was? I mean, he's become really good for them on the outside. So a nice 1-2 punch. They got Trayvon Merrick came in last year as a free agent, did a lot of good stuff in and around the line of scrimmage for this defense. So, look, I think it was one of the worst defenses in the league as of 2 years ago, and I think they've got far more talent on that side of the ball now, even with the scoring injury.
Yeah. The scoring injury is not like the difference between, this was a team that could do things and now your season's ruined. But it's a big blow to a defensive line that, was in really good shape with him, in less good shape without him. It's just a big loss to a defense when we've barely put on pads or started doing anything. So it's a shame. But, they're still in good shape. I mean, the spending spree that they made, I think, was good. Jalen Phillips is a good player. Devin Lloyd's a good player. They paid to get them, but I think they needed to. We saw what happened a year ago when they weren't willing to pay for Milton Williams, or at least weren't willing to pay enough to secure him. I think ultimately it's probably better to get the guy, right, rather than trying to go to plan B, C, and D if you're not able to do it. I think both sides of the ball have got talent.
Now, over under 7.5 for the Panthers. They're the defending NFC South champions. According to Warren Sharp, we said that the edges of the strength of schedule matter the most.
Yeah.
The Panthers are kind of clustered to the middle, but they're still 30th in strength of schedule. So it's on the more difficult side.
Right.
But it's not down like the Dolphins and the Cardinals are in this special world of good luck.
Mm-hmm.
But the Panthers are on the more difficult side of the schedule this year. And now they've got the injuries adding up, but I think they've put the roster in a much better spot heading into this year.
They have.
Where are you going to go over under-wise, 7.5?
A couple of question marks. They've definitely put the roster in a better spot. I'm going to go over. And just to prove what is becoming a conspiracy theory in the chat that we're not live, like this is a live video right now as demonstrated by me live replying to the guy Hutch in the chat.
Who thinks we're not live?
Proving it's live.
I've mentioned the chat multiple times.
Yeah. Well,
Also, what if we weren't?
Well, then we wouldn't be live.
Would you stop watching?
But we are live, as you can see by replying to the guy live.
Good work.
Thank you.
I'll also take the over for the Panthers for fear of hate text messages coming my way. Go. What's their slogan? Keep pounding?
Keep pounding is theirs, I think.
Hashtag. Yeah, let's do it. 2 more teams. New Orleans Saints are up next in the NFC South. Found their quarterback last year. They got Shuck.
Seems that way.
Saints moving in the right direction, right? They a team that was going for it forever. Kept maxing out the credit card. They started to pay off some of the bills and rebuild over these last couple of years. We got to get our friend Nick Underhill back on the show to get the full breakdown on the Saints. But they come into this year over under 7.5, and it does feel like the internet people are high on the Saints this year.
Yeah,
the internet people, the Ben Solaks and Greg Rosenthal's of the world, our NFL media friends. They're one of the hot, buzzy teams this offseason. Year 2 of Tyler Shuck and Chris Olave, Jordan Tyson. You've got this 1-2 punch at receiver. They were dealt a blow yesterday with Brian Bresee going down for the season at defensive tackle. He's been a pretty effective pass rusher for them. I don't think he's a great 3-down player, but he's gotten after the quarterback, and they already have a big question on the defensive line. But thoughts on the Saints heading into this season?
I think the reasons for optimism are definitely legit and there. And a large part of it is just Tyler Shuck. I mean, he looked really good last year, surprisingly so. I don't think that many people expected him to be that type of player, but he looked impressive, and it looks like it's for real. It's still a really small sample size. Let's see if he backs it up, but they're acting like he is, and they've surrounded him with some more talent. They bring in Jordan Tyson, obviously, in the draft. They also bring in Bryce Lance later on, who is a different type of player, is not redundant. Like, that could be a really interesting addition. So I wouldn't sort of sleep on him finding a role within this offense in addition to Tyson and Olave. They spent big in Travis Etienne in free agency. I don't know that I would have spent that kind of money, but he's a good player. Alvin Kamara is back, ready to go again. So, there's playmakers around Tyler Shuck.
I also really like what they've done on the defensive line, right? So they've
and actually the offensive line as well is really good shape.
Dude, I misspoke again. I meant offense. I don't actually like what they've done on the defensive line
we
overall.
Found our limit. The 4 days straight to the brains just at 40-something years old, the brain's just not working anymore.
They want us to do this 24-hour stream
all the time.
I know it's not live, but their offensive line, though, this could be one of the league's best. Kelvin Banks heads into year 2 at left tackle. He did a nice job as a rookie. Talise Fawanga has been solid at right tackle. He heads into year 3. And then they spent for David Edwards to come in and play left guard. So, and Eric McCoy, when he's healthy, one of the better centers in the league. So you're talking about, I'd say, 4/5 of the offensive line you feel good about. That's usually a pretty good starting point for all of us. If we say, hey, we feel good about 4 out of 5, you're a top 10 offensive line. And I think that's where the Saints are. Cesar Ruiz still the expected starter at right guard. I've been wanting to see an upgrade for that for about 6 years now. But 4 out of 5 looking pretty good for the Saints. So I think the O-line's looking pretty good. And then all the playmakers that you mentioned, Jordan Tyson and his hamstring injury situation at the end of last year and heading into this year. I think the injury thing's always going to be a question now with this group because of Olave's concussion history, Jordan Tyson's history. Tyler Shuck has had a huge injury history. So a lot of their main players are dealing with that injury question mark historically. But I like the direction it's moving. You bring in Noah Fant at tight end to go with Jawan Johnson. I do like what they've done on this offense.
It's true, actually. This team has one of the most sort of concerning injury pasts of any team, any roster you can think of. Like all of their important players have got something fairly frightening in their past that would, like even Chase Young, who's been,
Can we get Jason Verrett in New Orleans?
Right, good and productive for them recently, has got a pretty troubling injury history.
Just need J.K. Dobbins and Jason Verrett on this roster and really go for it here. Mickey, come on.
Tyler Eifert, he's probably not busy.
Shuck, I mean, he took over for Spencer Rattler, and then it wasn't that it was great right away, but there, in games where they scored like 17 points and 16 points, he made some comebacks. He's another guy who started to use his legs. Had a couple big runs. I think it was the Bucks game where it was scrambling and keeper, and he started to use his legs a little bit, and he had some of that fourth quarter magic. And I think that was a big part of the Tyler Shuck hype, and he avoided some of those disastrous turnover-worthy plays that were on his tape at Louisville, and looked really good as a rookie. So I think, again, the Saints' optimism is tied to Shuck looked good. They invested in a receiver, they invested in the offensive line, they invested at running back. So they've tried to do a solid to their year 2 quarterback and invest around him, and I think that's where a lot of the positives lie. The other part of it is Brandon Staley took over as defensive coordinator with Kellen Moore as head coach last year, which was interesting, right? They were inverted in Los Angeles, where Kellen Moore was the OC for Staley, the head coach. But Staley, despite a failed head coaching tenure with the Chargers, has been a really good defensive coordinator, and he steps into a team that has okay talent. It's not great talent-wise on that side of the ball, and they started to become a pretty good defense for the first time in a while. So I think that's the other part of the optimism here is that he's done a nice job on that side of the ball, and even though I'd rather see some better depth in the front seven and everything, Staley did a nice job as DC last year.
Yeah, it definitely did. And that defense, therefore, looked a lot better with the personnel group that they'd had. They've added some players to it, but I think generally he's got those guys playing better as well. So, yeah, I think for the first time in a while, this defense could be one that's better than the sum of the parts again.
So on that side of the ball, love the addition of Caden Ellis. Mentioned him a lot with the Falcons and what he was able to do and develop as the Zach Bond late career breakout type at linebacker. So they add Ellis, returns to the Saints. He's been fantastic these last couple of years. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, we had some questions about their cornerback room last year. He took a step forward last year in year 2. Probably some questions opposite him with Martin Emerson and Quincy Riley and others battling for that spot opposite Kool-Aid. Jonas Sanker, I think they're going to have him step down, play the slot a little bit this year, play nickel, try to be that big nickel type, and I think that's a good fit for his skill set. year 2 safety. And then the defensive line. It's where if Brian Brzee was healthy, you'd still have some question marks, right?
Now they need Christian Miller to be good quickly.
I like Miller. They're round 2 pick out of Georgia. I like him a lot. I think there's certainly more pressure on him. You got Nathan Shepard's pretty good in the run game. Devon Godshaw's always been just okay. But I don't think they have a ton of impact players on the D-line. And the one thing Brzee did a pretty decent job of was getting after the QB. And I just don't know how much you trust any of these guys rushing from the interior. Tyree Wilson, they traded for him from the Raiders. He does his best work rushing from the interior. So maybe in nickel and dime situations, he can do that. And then Carl Granderson and Chase Young are solid. I mean, Chase Young playing his best football probably the last year or so for the Saints. So it's not devoid of talent, but yeah, I'm a little worried about the defensive line once again for the Saints. Remember, 2020, 21, like this was one of the better defensive lines in the NFL. They have not been able to get that depth back up to where it was. Also, is Cam Jordan coming back once again?
Yeah,
he's back as well. And I love Cam Jordan, but how much you're relying on him as we head into year, 15, 16 for him?
They also finally signed that, not that they finally signed him, but he finally signed somewhere. That Xavier Harris guy, the monster defensive tackle who Renner thought should play offensive tackle, Mississippi.
I don't know if he makes an impact. No, I liked Harris fine as a defensive tackle.
I mean, if he repeats those 3 plays where he wrecked Maui Noah, he could be the best defensive tackle
he had some really nice splash plays, like every 6'7" defensive tackle you write down. Pad level issues, similar to Brzee, right? You get moved when you get when 4 hands are on you, you're getting moved. That was always an issue for Brzee in the run game. So yeah, a lot of optimism for the Saints. I don't know if I'm fully there yet compared to the offseason optimism, but if Shuck takes another step forward and you do get, Jordan Tyson he's worth discussing at receiver. When he was healthy, a lot of people had him as wide receiver 1. There was talk about him being the first wide receiver off the board. He wasn't, but he was close. And he just had that, moves a little different than some of these other receivers in the draft ability about him.
And even late, I mean, once he ran his pro day and, made a catch in the end zone, everyone's like, it's all's good. He's wide receiver 1 again. Like that came back the second, like right towards the end of the process once people decided he was healthy. Yeah, look, you can see why. I mean, again, the way he moves, that quick twitch ability, he's got some sort of OBJ to the way he moves and shifts and gets away from people. The question is, is that necessarily, does he maximize separation by doing that, or is it just a little, sometimes people move that way? And then you got the big thing of, can he stay healthy?
All right, man. Saints over under 7.5. Is anybody over 7.5 in this division?
Probably not. I'm going to go over. Let's buy into the hype.
Buy into the hype. Let's do it. Over for the Saints. And they're 7.5. Let's wrap it all up. NFC South, NFL, final team, the Tampa Bay Bucs. Look at that. They're the favorites. Over under 8.5 for the Bucs. Baker Mayfield heads into the final year of his contract, and it looks like it's going to be a contract year. They're not going to get something settled before the season. Zach Robinson comes in as offensive coordinator. Todd Bowles returns as head coach. There were some questions about whether or not that would happen. The defense fell apart a bit at the end of last season. Remember, the Bucs were expected to win the division, and they didn't. They did have a bit of a second-half collapse last season. You also have just a lot of former Bucs turnover here. Levante David retiring, Mike Evans off to San Francisco,
Gone.
And now Vita Vea, as of record time, potentially asking for a trade. I think Zach Robinson just running everybody out of town here for the Bucs.
Yeah. And well, you can relate. Zach comes into the building, you're like, getting out of here.
Now look at, we all left. It's all his fault.
The company fell apart years after he left, So the Baker Mayfield thing obviously is the most interesting thing. It's a contract impasse. They've decided to park it. They're not going to keep negotiating going into the season. So he's basically going to play the last year of his contract and then see what happens in the offseason. Unlike the last time his contract was, up for debate with Cleveland, it's a very similar situation in terms of, he obviously wants the big long-term contract. They don't want to give him that yet. They kind of want to make him show it, show us for real, the real high-end version, then sure, we'll talk. immediately he got hurt that season for Cleveland. Like week 2, he injured his shoulder, kept playing, made it worse, played like crap. And then the Browns were like, thanks for that, but we're going to go get this guy over here. You can leave now. And then so this is the thing, he then orchestrated his way out of Cleveland, right? Having been shunned, he then went, well, I'm now upset. Get me out of here, right? People sort of put that on him as opposed to, but like they just pulled the rug out from under. Anyway, so now you've got a slightly different situation where I think it's reasonably amicable at the moment. They've kind of agreed to disagree, and we'll park this for now. We'll come back to the table. If you play well this season, it's kind of like a franchise tag for him, right? If you play well this year, you bet on yourself, you're going to get paid. Plus, he'll have the leverage of the market that's coming up if he does so. I don't know what way that's going to go with Baker, right? Whether that kind of motivation is what you're going to get the best version of Baker all year. He's really going to be playing to, stick it to the suits that haven't given him his contract, or whether it's going to go badly again like it has for him at other times in his career.
I used to think that would work in his favor. I thought he would be the good chip on your shoulder guy.
I think he generally
is.
is.
Because I hate that as analysis, but he's one of the few spite guys.
What I am.
But I don't know that it matters that much.
I think it probably does, but what I'm starting to think about Baker Mayfield is, you hear all the time, like nobody's playing 100%, right? Everybody's playing through something. Like I saw a bunch of former players sort of tweeting the last couple of days, like this is the last time this year that these guys are going to be 100% healthy, The first day before training camp is the last time your body's okay. After that, something's wrong from this point until the end of the season. So everybody's playing through something. I am thinking that Baker Mayfield reacts worse to that than other quarterbacks, right? It's not like it's just a reality. It's not like a character flaw. I just think he plays worse when there's something banged up on him than other quarterbacks do, or some other quarterbacks do. And I think that's the issue, is if and when Baker picks up an injury this year, it's how well he's able to battle through that, because he will. I mean, that's the one piece of evidence we have from his career so far, is he's tough. He will play through the injury. The question is only how much does that hamper him, even if we only find that out in hindsight when he discloses the list of things that was wrong with him in the previous season. So that's the thing I think. I think he is probably pretty well motivated by spite or showing people something, but I just don't know if it's enough to overcome. If you get a knee injury, if you get an ankle injury, if you bang your shoulder up, how much does that affect him?
Here's the other thing about Baker, right? Because we always talk about quarterback playing style, and the time he got injured in Cleveland was him trying to lower his shoulder and make a tackle on an interception. And I'm not saying every injury is the quarterback's fault, but it's not like
even just last year.
He's not trying to avoid contact.
Look at all those 3rd and 15 runs where he's bouncing, skittling off people. Like, he's not a guy that's protecting himself.
Who was trying to protect was it school? Or was that in Minnesota? Tristan Wirfs was out the first few weeks last year. I mean, he had backup off.
Not school.
Graham Barton was playing left tackle for him last year. Couldn't do it. You had backup offensive linemen early in the season. He's under pressure, but he's not changing his game for that. He's actually doing more, and he was scrambling like crazy. He was an MVP candidate because he was willing them to win, which is a great thing, but it has long-term consequences, and it did. He was playing extremely hurt last year, and they finished 2-8.
Yeah.
So that's a part of his game, and I always say, try to figure out that balance. How do you avoid the hits? But be the tough guy. Be the guy that's, leading your team to victory. And his scrambling ability was really good, I'd say, the last year or two. The way he's picked his spots. When you talk about Baker's contract, let me just lay this out. It's worth discussing. If you look at his time in Cleveland, which was 4 years, and his time in Tampa Bay, which is 3 years, because sometimes some people have this perception that either he was a bust in Cleveland and then came good in Tampa, right? Because we have these discussions. Oh, if you leave those terrible franchises, you lose the shackles, and you go to a good franchise, you'll turn it around and you'll be like Sam Darnold. And then other people who are just like, I don't know, they think he was good in Cleveland but not great. His numbers, he's got a lot of numbers that are eerily similar across both areas. Like, he was a 500 quarterback in Cleveland, 29-30, 1-1 in the playoffs. He's about a 500 quarterback with the Bucs, a little over, 27-24, 1-1 in the playoffs. Averaged exactly 7.3 yards per attempt in both spots. Almost exactly the same sack percentage, almost exactly the same number of fourth quarter comebacks. The one difference has been, more touchdown to interception ratio has been better in Tampa Bay. I just say all that to say he's been he's been fine. He's been good in Tampa, right? It was an incredible buy low in the post-Tom Brady era by Jason Light to bring him in, get to the playoffs a couple times, win a playoff game. But has he settled in like as a 500 type of quarterback? Is that just who he is? Because he's been that across 2 extended starting spots. Now his career record's even worse because he's had weird stints with the Rams and with the Panthers. But my point is, the QB record matters a little bit, especially over time. He's settled in as a slightly above 500 quarterback for the Bucs, and that's why I think they're sitting here saying, do we want to pay you $50 or $60 million for that? Even though I think he's been good for them, you're asking, he's been a 500 quarterback in the NFC South.
We talked about it a bit with Bryce Young. Like, he's incredibly volatile, incredibly inconsistent. There's all kinds of weird things about Baker Mayfield, but it seems to be shaking out to just this sort of average level starting quarterback. And maybe that's always going to be, when he's healthy, he plays like a top 10 quarterback, and when he gets banged up, he plays like a bottom third quarterback. And over the course of the season, based off injury averages and just how much he's banged up, that's going to shake out to a roughly average quarterback over a 17-game schedule. It's just not going to be average every single week. Like, whatever it is, that appears to be the picture emerging of Baker Mayfield. Like, whether or not it's his fault or whether it's when outside influences start to take effect, he becomes this average quarterback over a large enough sample size. Whatever's influencing it doesn't really matter as much as the Bucs rather are trying to make this decision of, does that guy get $50 million a year? And the answer is probably no.
And remember, it used to almost work the opposite of making sense. Because when they added OBJ, he got worse, right? Every time they did something that felt like it should have made him better, it went worse. And when he was in a worse situation, it got better. And it was tough to predict, right? So that's been Baker.
Yeah.
And I like him. He's a good quarterback. Again, it's just a matter of, is he worth everything? So, look, if he plays this year, contract on the line, I think if he stays healthy, he might end up getting paid, and he's going to look pretty good.
And it's a very different prospect for Tampa Bay as well. It's like, it's showing you, teams invest in contracts as much as players. Like Baker at $4 million a year, or the bottom bargain basement deal, is an absolute steal.
Or 30,
right?
At 30, it's good.
It's great value. But then the next deal, when he wants top of the market money, that's when you have to start saying.
He's been one of the bargains at $33 million a year the last couple of years. Was obviously a bargain at $4 million.
Yeah.
It's a fair question.
Now the math is going to change,
yes.
and so that changes the equation, which potentially changes the answer.
Now, what does he have around him? As mentioned, Zach Robinson coming in, calling the plays after being in Atlanta. Zach was with him with the Rams that one year. He had to come off the plane.
The guy coaching him through the plane.
Yes. Playmaker-wise, you have an aging Chris Godwin, Emeka Egbuka, who looked outstanding before his hamstring injury. Same type of question, right? Did he just revert back into Emeka Egbuka, or did the injury have a big factor? I'm going to lean injury because I loved him as a prospect. You're going to lean, well, that's just who he is because that's who he is. But Egbuka showed he could maybe do a little bit more than just be a slot receiver. I thought he could win on the outside and was very effective early in the season.
Yeah, I think some alignment thing is going to play in there as well. How much X does he need to play? And do they have the guy that can play X? Because obviously Mike Evans was that guy. He's no longer there. I think overall, name-wise, the receiving room is really strong. Jalen McMillan, Tez Johnson, Chris Godwin, Emeka Egbuka, Ted Hurst now the rookie. The question is which one of those guys can play the snaps that Mike Evans was playing, even if they can't do the job that Mike Evans was doing. To me, Ted Hurst is the most obvious skill set for that position. And again, a little bit like Chris Brazzell in Carolina before he got hurt. I wonder if the plan would be Ted Hurst is going to play a ton in that sacrificial X role just to get those snaps to free up Egbuka, McMillan, Tez Johnson, Godwin to play other roles. And then maybe the byproduct of that is Ted Hurst will have quite a large role in the offense as well, but really he'd just be there to have somebody occupying those snaps.
Then brought back Cade Otton as a free agent and tight end, and then Payne Durham as their more blocking tight end. I think they got some pieces offensively. O-line-wise, Tristan Wirfs, absolute star at left tackle. Luke Gedeke at right tackle, who's fantastic in my mind. I like him a lot. Graham Barton at center. I think that's I say 3/5 you feel pretty good about, a little bit less about the guards. And be interesting to see if Zach changes up schematically what they're going to do from a run game perspective. They were so zone heavy in part because of O-line coach, and that was Bijan's game, man. That was what he did, wide zone type of stuff. Bucky Irving, Kenneth Gainwell as the 1-2 punch at running back. Bucky, as long as he's back and healthy, man, he looks so good as a rookie. But I think you might get a more diverse run game here in Tampa Bay when you don't have the type of O-line that Atlanta had and Bijan and like all of the forces and what they had.
I think that line's pretty good, though. Like, the tackles are great. I like Graham Barton at center. I think he'll look a lot better this year now that he doesn't have to go moonlighting at tackle to
real
patch
quick.
things up.
It's another team bringing back all 5.
Yeah.
Is this a banner year? Is this a banner year
for offensive line continuity
for all 5 offensive linemen coming back?
I don't know. I haven't studied that in any.
I feel like we've said this about a lot of teams. You got all 5 coming back. All 5.
Well, I think part of that is as well. Again, what we talked about with the Texans, like the drop off from the starters to the backups is so huge in today's NFL. It's so steep that if you have 5 viable offensive linemen,
don't let it happen.
Right, you can't let them
leave.
Don't
live in this world of not having.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of hindsight, but somebody was saying the Panthers were surprised at the lack of market for Rasheed Walker, not because Rasheed Walker had been particularly good, but because like a year before, Dan Moore Jr. had gotten $21 million a year from being an average to below average starting left tackle. Like those guys get paid a ton of money because if you don't have one, you're screwed. So Rasheed Walker only getting $4 million a year is kind of crazy. But I think it's true. Like if you have 5 viable offensive linemen, you have no incentive to ever let them leave the building.
All right, let's go defensive side of the ball here for the Bucs. Todd Bowles' defense. First off, the Falcons, Kirk Cousins, Zach, they kind of carved him up, so they brought him into the building. That's going to help this defense. You don't have to face Zach.
You would hope.
And Kirk twice a year.
Yeah.
That's
Imagine how rough it would be if they brought him into the building and then didn't find out how he got. Like, how are you carving me up twice a year with Kirk Cousins for 500 yards? Meanwhile, there's like video of Kirk Cousins out here looking like some geriatric moving around. Like, ugh. Did you see that video? He's like running little shuttles looking like you. It's rough. When you used to run the floor in basketball at the Y, it looked a lot like that.
Good for Kirk. So he's in good shape, feeling good.
Well, just if you were wondering, 2 years removed from the Achilles, is he back to full bounceability and,
what age? That was
spry?
When we were playing, I was only like 37, 38. That's
right where he is.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Kirk, very relatable. All right, defensively, let me just say this. The biggest wild card here, number 15 overall pick, Reuben Bain Jr. If he is truly a tone-setting, game-changing defensive lineman, he was talked about as going top 5, but he had short arms. Short arms.
That's the case. Like, just ask the question, what if Reuben Bain's arm length doesn't matter?
But he has a chance to completely change this defense. In a way like Jared Verse stepped into the Rams, who had a bunch of youth and didn't have a ton of talent, and Jared Verse changed that defense. And it took like half a season before it all came together, but he helped change that defense. Does Reuben Bain have that ability?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question. Love Reuben Bain as a prospect. Think he could be that guy. Maybe he's the best player in this entire draft. If he is, it's one of the biggest rookie impacts that anybody's going to make this year. The other X factor, obviously, is do they get this Vita Vea thing resolved? He's asked for a trade. My position on that remains consistent, that's a negotiating tactic more than it is anything else. Just because a player asks for a trade means nothing more than the contract negotiations are not going well. So, do they get that done? Do they get him happy? Do they play hardball with him and just get him or get him playing anyway and he just has to deal with it? What does that look like? Or do they trade him away? Does it actually manifest a trade to somebody like, as you said, Jacksonville or another team that could really use a Vita Vea?
So pretty significant turnover here on this side of the ball the last couple of years for the Bucs. So we'll see what happens with Vita Vea,
because that's obviously huge, literally and metaphorically. But Yaya Diaby's really good. Reuben Bain could be amazing. You've got David Walker coming back from a year ago, who we love. Kalijah Kancey's at least useful as a designated pass rushing type of defensive tackle, and then Vita Vea, who's a really good, if frustrating, defensive tackle. Well, if you take Vea out of that, it's completely different. Now you're like, Yaya Diaby's the best player in this defensive line, and he's good, not great. Well,
because Vita's really good in the run game, and whether he's got to be accounted for in both run and pass, and then run game-wise, he's got that agility and the athleticism to get up and down the line of scrimmage. He's not just a 340-pound immovable object type.
And he moves around deployment-wise.
Right.
So you can't just key on him as the nose tackle at all times.
Right, because like A'Shawn Robinson's there. He's a pretty good run defender overall, but Kalijah Cansey's more of a pass rusher type as he's coming off of his injury. Like Vea is a certain type that not a lot of people in the NFL, not a lot of teams in the NFL have players that can do what he can do. So if he's not with the Bucs, then you're talking about, okay, now you've lost Mike Evans and you've lost Levante David. I kind of like what they've done at linebacker. David's been so good since 2012. They were really struggling with Savassier Dennis in coverage last year. They bring in Josiah Trotter, who's more of a run defender out of Missouri, but Alex Anzalone, one of the better coverage linebackers in the NFL. I think that helps solve some of their middle of the field problems that they had last year. And then the back seven, again, turnover-wise, Jamel Dean out. They lost Carlton Davis a few years ago. Like those guys were so consistent for years. They went with Zion McCollum a couple years ago. The youth movement, he's been solid, but the cornerback spot opposite him, big question mark. I loved Benjamin Morrison coming out of Notre Dame, but he had some injury issues. He looked a little overwhelmed as a rookie. Jacob Parrish did a nice job playing nickel, might be able to play outside a little bit, but I would say the cornerback spot opposite McCollum. Like McCollum's fine, but the cornerback spot opposite him is a bit of a question. And again, Bulls defense just has, against good offenses, they can get picked apart a little bit. But that's where I go back to if Ruben Bain and Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey, if that group is out there, that helps protect this back seven a little bit.
Yeah, it's a very young and inexperienced and inconsistent cornerback group across the board for them. So that's definitely a concern. There's also the question of what does the loss of Levante David do to them from just a sort of veteran leadership and alignment point of view. You know, David is the consistent force who'd been able to, like, the sort of Harrison Smith of that defense, right? The guy that's able to get everybody lined up consistently. Alex Anzalone coming in to sort of replace the veteran leadership part, but he's new to this defense, right? He doesn't have the muscle memory, the inbuilt knowledge of the system that Levante David had built up for a decade. So that part's going to be a big thing. Who in that defense is capable of getting everyone on the same page at the same time and making sure that they know what they're doing?
All right, man. Over under 8.5 for the Bucs. I'm gonna take the over for all of our friends.
Yeah, okay. Let's say Spiteful Baker is going to win.
Spiteful
9 or more games. We've speculated. Were you going over too?
Over as well. Yeah.
Did you see
32 out of 32? We did it.
Did you see an update to the? We mentioned before that currently the only healthy arm for the Atlanta Falcons is an undrafted rookie. But
I'm going to predict that Matt Ryan is running drills.
There you go. The Matt Ryan position has finally come good because Matt Ryan's out here throwing drills to receivers.
That's why there's no better fit for the Matt Ryan commemorative president job
than Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
He's out here slinging the ball because they need the ball.
Who else interviewed for that?
For the Matt Ryan job?
Actually, I think Ian Cunningham interviewed for it technically.
Right.
But then got to get the GM job. But that's why no one else was getting that job.
Because they don't have the.
Who else is stepping into camp, chucking it around?
Well, who else? Yeah, you would have to.
Pete Carroll could do it. Pete would step into drills. Zach was doing that a couple years ago with the Rams when they had nobody with Stafford.
So he would have been doing it if he stayed there.
They'll be calling John Wolford up soon.
Yes.
Get John Wolford out here. That's good. Good update, Sam.
I mean, that's the kind of versatility you need in your front office, you know?
You do.
That's
why I can't be a GM. You think I'm going to throw the football around? I mean, I could throw a baseball.
No, you could. I mean, it wouldn't go that close to the receiver, but you could. It would look good until the ball arrived.
Oh, so maybe I should. You think throw that on the resume?
Yeah.
I could.
So
I could step into camp drills. I don't know if my timing would be great.
That's true. I think it's one of those ones where if they just don't film the end, you know, if they just sort of. The mechanics are good. The ball leaps out of your hand, right? And then we just don't follow it to where it goes. You know, when we got that the smoked sausage target at PFF, right? The thing with the holes in it, and we were all throwing the football at it,
zipping that thing.
I was genuinely concerned that you were going to dent the sheet metal that we had to send back.
So now you think I do throw fast?
To only footballs that we had to send back to Eckrich, right? I genuinely thought you were going to put a dent in that thing, and we were going to have to explain how we'd broken their target, and it was because you can't hit the hole, but we're just burying the ball through the sheet metal. You throw a football extremely hard. Now,
it's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Not necessarily that accurately, but with velocity. Is there. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you could, it would look like an NFL quarterback if you didn't care about accuracy.
I was zipping it at the NFL Experience a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I had a couple good ones in there. Hit the target and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could do Matt Ryan's job.
It would be like Jeff George, Leaps out of his hand in a vague general direction of a receiver.
Or I could be like Josh Allen. Just give me a couple of years, get the footwork down, and improve the accuracy.
Rebuild your mechanics.
Yeah. All right, man. This was fun. We went all 32 teams this week, Monday through Thursday. Be sure to check out the previous episodes if you have not. Next week, programming notes. Monday morning, we're going to have Aaron Schatz on the show, formerly of Football Outsiders, FTN, the godfather of DVOA. And so Aaron Schatz is going to help us preview the season. So we're going to get his take on where DVOA stands.
Okay.
DVOA. On the NFL and which teams
and DR
they like. DR, of course. We may have procured.
You already put it out there. Like you put it out there when it wasn't procured. You might as well.
More steps have been taken.
Yeah.
Invites have been sent.
Well, the
terms have been agreed to.
The traditional way of doing this is to not put it out there when it's unconfirmed, and then when it's confirmed, you can then
I've confirmed.
reveal.
But, stuff happens. What if?
No, I know. That's why the other way of doing it is to never confirm it until it's done.
Maybe he could get.
You went like the third way, which is the worst way.
Monday we will have Les Snead on the show. That's the expectation.
In theory, yeah.
In theory, Rams general manager Les Snead got some great discussion points.
Yeah,
for Les.
A lot of questions to ask him.
A lot of questions.
This should be exciting.
So I'm looking forward to Monday's show. We'll be back to 2 shows a week next week, Monday and Thursday, and then the following week we'll go back to in season 3. That sound good? Because next Thursday, a week from today, Hall of Fame game.
Football, actual
One
games.
more week with no football
Sort
games. Yes. So Hall of Fame games.
Actual sort of football.
You never answered me. Should we drive up to Canton to see should we do Panthers Cardinals next Thursday? Should we go?
We could. Could we get, what, the doctor can just get his credentials to that? Is that how that works?
I assume he could probably, it's the first preseason game.
That feels like a one that's quite difficult to get media credentials.
I'll see what we could, I feel like he could get us into the huddle to call a play. It's week 1 of the preseason.
Yeah. I'd never really paid attention to what that weekend looks like because there's a whole thing, right? They do the actual Hall of Fame. That's the weekend after the game? Is that how that works?
Yeah.
Like the ceremony?
The Hall of Fame game used to be on a Saturday. Then they moved it to a Sunday. Now it's Thursday.
Yeah.
So I assume that kicks off.
But they haven't moved the rest of the stuff. So they do the game first.
Yeah, I think that probably kicks off the weekend of festivities.
Then the ceremony stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe we should do it. All right, man. That's it. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again Monday, 9 a.m. More. Check the mic.